What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto wants to have babies with Shion? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. You'll come to visit me, won't you? She whispered in his ear as they gave embrace and goodbye. Naruto tightened his hold on her, his face falling slightly. I can't promise anything. Shion's face fell as well, and she slowly buried her face in his shoulder. But if I have my way, he muttered on, I'd come see you every day. But I'll try my best to come back. Soon as possible. A small smile slipped up Shion's face in happiness and hope. Okay, was the only thing she could squeak out. She wanted to have a tantrum, demanding Naruto's friends to make sure he came back, but she had her reasons why she wouldn't do so. One reason was because deep down she knew there was no use in that, and the second, and most important reason, because she was sure that she was going to have to be an adult soon. And she would proudly give away her childhood for the reason. They pulled away gently, holding brave faces. Goodbye Naruto. Shion sighed with love, looking him in the eyes. Come on, Naruto, called an irritated Neji. Naruto gritted his teeth, bending his head down to stop himself from yelling abuse at the idiot calling him. He looked back up Shion, his eyes filled with paramour. Goodbye, Shion, and he turned away and began to walk towards his waiting team. At the sight of him getting closer, they turned round as well and began to read on. The blonde heaved a heavy sigh, before he felt a hand on his shoulder that spanned him round to see those gorgeous eyes once again. Before he could speak, those hand moved to his cheek, accompanied by another on the opposite cheek, and a pair of rosebud lips crashed against his with the heat of amity and affection. While hers were closed tightly, his were open, watching the glittering waterfall trail from her eyes and cracking his heart. She pulled away breathless, still holding the tanned face in her hands. I love you, Naruto blurted out. Shion blinked. What? She croaked, wiping her tears away. I never told you, he said in a hushed voice so no one but the girl could hear him, the other night. You said you loved me but I didn't say back, I just kind of, he shifted where he stood awkwardly, used you. Oh Naruto. Shion gushed loudly, causing Naruto's team to freeze in their walk when they realized he wasn't there. Shion lowered her voice like Naruto had, I love you too, but darling. You didn't use me. If anything, Naruto, bellowed Neji. Naruto frowned, looking away from Shion like before, muttering colorful words under his breath. You better go, Shion whispered to him, deciding not to finish her previous sentence. Yeah, Naruto giggled nervously, feeling his cheeks lose Shion's touch. Goodbye, sayonara. Naruto turned around and walked away, officially this time. He wanted Shion to stop him again, but she did not, and for that he respected her for it. She knew what he had to do, and she wasn't going to stop him. She joined him group, who had waited this time make sure he defiantly was with them, and they strolled off, Shion watching them leave with a grateful grin. A hand floated to her abdomen and rested them, her thumbs stroking it soothingly. Please let this have worked, she mumbled to herself, now only being about to see the team as black smudges in the mist. Shion crawled across her bed and looked at the paper calendar sitting on the white drawer near her. She kicked her legs happily as she read the calendar for that month. She took a quick look at the month before, and then flipped back. It had happened again, or maybe she should say, hadn't happened again to be more accurate. Her whole cycle had stopped for a second month. No bad cramping and hot flushes for a week, followed by a week where she felt like her insides were ripping apart. Well, technically they were in a way, and then just an uncomfortable few days. Then between then and the start of the cramping again she felt fine. But nothing. Now the priestess had felt fine for 2 months. 8 weeks of feeling great, healthy and happy. Shion was now pretty sure her prayers had been answered, but she told herself not to get excited just yet. It was early days, meaning no other symptoms had occurred yet, and it could all just be her body recovering after everything that happened. After all, she was pretty traumatized ever since everything she had experienced, plus, she had read somewhere that falling in love can sometimes affect the body's eating and fertility cycles. She couldn't help but grin madly as she read the calendar again and again. The pale blonde jumped off her bed in bliss and began to dance around the room with happiness. Twisting and turning, her head thrown back and laughing, Shion pranced about the room with a heart full of joy. Please let it be, she pleaded in her head, all then hope going into her prayer. Miles away, Someone was doing the exact opposite in their own kitchen. Get off the floor, Naruto, there's no need for this, Kakashi sighed lightly, trying not to be too harsh on the boy. Naruto, lying flat on the floor, with his hands in a beseeching position above his head, face pressed against the wood, looked up slowly with a childish pout. He allowed his hands to drop to the floor with a thud, blue eyes burning at the white-haired sensei. You've been begging like this for 2 months now. Kakashi raised his eyebrows as Naruto slowly bent his head back to the floor in humiliation, and it's been the same answer every time. You're busy, we're busy. Please Kakashi-sensei. It's urgent, Naruto argued desperately, still not giving up after all the times he was shot down. He changed his position so he was sitting on his heels. I need to see her, Naruto, Kakashi spoke with reassurance, bending down to the blonde. You'll find someone else. It was just a crush, and crushes, and girls for that matter, fade. Your aim in life won't. Please, Naruto, I'd hate to see you damage all your hard work just for a girl. He placed his strong hand on the blonde's shoulder. I won't damage it, sensei. Naruto told him weakly, and she's not just a girl, she's... I'll make you a deal, Naruto. Kakashi interrupted him, causing the boy to look at his sensei with a hopeful expression. Depending on what happens, and if you work hard, I'll let you visit her. Maybe, only maybe? Naruto squeaked out, his heart sinking. It's the best I can do. And with that, Kakashi got up and began to head out Naruto's home. I'll see you at practice, he said, hand on doorknob. He waited for a reply and, at hearing nothing, looked round and glanced at the boy. The defeated blonde was still on the floor, head bent in misery like a beaten puppy in despair. Kakashi sighed, shaking his head, and left. At the sound of the door shutting, Naruto's head shot up with a confident look on his face. Alright Kakashi-sensei, Naruto smirked to himself. If that's the way it is, he pulled himself to his feet, dusting himself down. Then I'll just have to take everything into my own hands. He giggled menacingly, still staring at the door. If Kakashi wouldn't give him permission to leave the village to see Shion, then he'd find another way, right or wrong, good or bad, it didn't matter. He would see Shion again, and soon. He had to do. His heart ached and he felt like he was slowly losing his mind from missing her so. How could he just forget about her, like Sakura had told him to the other day, when she was always on his mind? At the moment, Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by the rumble of his stomach. Making a happy, oh, sound, he dashed to the cupboards and began rummaging through the compartments greedily in search of some ramen to cook, totally forgetting his train of thought for the moment. Shion acted very careful when it came to her body, know that she was 70% sure of her situation. At the same time, she carried on with her other new aim. She tried to be easy to her servants, asking very little of them and treating them with all the respect she knew they deserved. She found this difficult, since she didn't want to harm herself due to her possible condition, but she didn't want to take advantage of her servant and people's kindness. Her people had changed their opinion on her, but still showed signs of fear. Shion understood that time was needed for her people to fully see her as a different person, but yet that they would never see her as harmless as a daisy, more like as harmless as a rose. Beautiful in so many ways, but with thorns that you really should not touch. Shion honestly didn't mind that, or she forced herself to accept it all. But why should it matter to her now, when someone would soon enter the world and accept her as everything? That one person will accept above all, and how could she forget the other person who accepts her? Who gave her a chance and gave the future accepting being? Naruto accepted her. In fact, he accepted her so far and out that he loved her. Shion hadn't thought he'd return her feelings, just that he'd do as she had asked of him, keeping his promise, be a help to her and her village, and leave, maybe to drop by one day randomly and say, hello. How's everything? But no, he felt the same, and he loved her. Now she prayed for Naruto to return to her. She could give their children everything she didn't have. Always be there for her, have a father around. It was then that she remembered that she knew very little about Naruto's family and background. She was sure he mentioned something about not having a mother, but what about his dad? He better come back now. She felt like she hardly knew the father of her child, and that is not good. A week later, Shion fell onto her bed, catching her breath, pulling a face of disgust and the revolting taste in her mouth. Now she was sure. Her plan had worked. With the awful taste still her mouth, she grabbed one of her pillows and hugged it tightly, squealing to herself with happiness. She was pregnant with an heir, a future priestess or priest, Naruto's baby. This was brilliant. Her throne was going to be secure. She finally had someone she'd have blood relation with plus unquestionable love for, and she truly had a memory of the blonde ninja who she might never see again. She threw pillow over her head into floor. Before sitting up cross-legged, she gently placed her hands on her stomach with a soft smile. "I don't really mind what you look like," she whispered, "but I'd love for you to look like your daddy." She giggled, her thumbs making circular motions on her stomach. Beautiful, shiny, thin, sunny blonde hair, a natural rich tan, and such wonderful big, bright, sparkling blue eyes. She giggled again like a happy little girl. Even the scars on his cheeks would be adorable. A tiny tear rolled down her cheek. "I'll protect you," she mumbled the same words its father had told her just 3 months before. "Also, I hope you have his personality rather than mine." "Well," she paused with a small smirk, "maybe not his temper, but I wouldn't want you to have mine either." She looked at her clothed stomach fondly, before whipping off her shirt and top and left them lying beside her lazily. She held her stomach once again, wishing already that she could feel it moving. "I just want you to be positive like him, yeah? And try hard and not give up. He's going to achieve so much and I want you to be like that too, okay?" she ordered her unborn child. She paused, just massaging her stomach absent-mindedly as a few tears slipped from her eyes like petite raindrops. "I'll protect you," she sniffed, trying to hold herself together, because I'm not going to have your daddy around much, baby." "Maybe not at all." Her voice began to break. "He's not going to be here. Even though I want him to be here with us so much." The odd tear became a waterfall, sprawling down her face like a storm. "See?" she tittered through her tears. "I'm not positive at all. Unlike him." "Naruto?" Shion hugged her stomach as she cried, falling onto her side on the bed and wrapping herself into a fetal position. She howled loudly in her misery. She never wanted Naruto with her more than at the moment. She wanted to tell him, thank him, make love to him again and tell him over and over how much she loved him, how much she cared for him, how much she felt honored to just feel the touch of his fingertips on her own. She wanted to show him she loved him, cared for him, honored him. Through her waterworks, her loud cries quietening down, Shion began to smile once again. "I'd love you to be a girl," she mumbled. "We could have the same relationship as I had with my mother." "But if you were a boy," she sniffed, "I called Naruto after your daddy. I'd have you grow big and strong and respectful, just like your daddy. I bet you'd look so much like him." Shion unraveled herself from her position and crawled to the top of her bed, grabbing her shirt on the way and rested her head. She hugged her shirt to her chest and focused on her breathing, trying to force herself to relax and calm down. As she did so, there was a knock at her bedroom door. "Enter," she called, her voice still a little shaky from crying. "Priestess," began one of the servants, hands cupped together to show peace and concern, bowing swiftly as he pounced into the room at the ready to help his priestess. "We heard your wails. Are you all right, my priestess?" Shion sighed and sat up to look at the servant. A cheerful grin spread across her face, and sat up, still holding her top to her chest. "Yes, Ren. In fact, I have some good news for everyone." She shuffled herself to the end of the bed using one hand. Ren, the servant, cocked his head to one side and asked, "What is it, my lady?" "My throne will be secured," she announced with grace, "for I am heading towards being 3 months with child." Ren's eyes grew in alarm. "My priestess, this is wonderful news. If you don't mind my asking," he began delicately, "but how did this all come about?" Shion frowned at Ren's odd way of asking her who the father was, before shaking away her disliking and smiling again. "The father is a friend, Ren." "Just friend?" The servant blinked. "May I ask if it was one of those who escorted you to the shrine?" "Yes, Ren." Shion nodded. "You may ask more questions if you can turn around so I keep my dignity while I dress." Ren spun round so he had his back to his mistress before asking awkward, "And please priestess, may I ask if all was intentional?" "Yes." Shion agreed, his feminine voice, pulling her shirt and top back on. "I found one of them to be impressive and loving, Ren. His good looks, strong body and positive attitude seemed like perfect traits for a future priestess or priest, wouldn't you agree?" "Yes, priestess. It seemed you chose smartly," Ren agreed, his true opinion seeping into his voice, revealing to Shion that he may slightly believe it was a bad choice. But why should it matter to her? Was it not her body, her child, her throne, her power? She could choose who she would give her virginity to, who shall father her child, and so on and so on. Ren's opinion would mean nothing, but Shion did want to show some respect and trust to her servants. "Turn back," she ordered lightly, with Ren's reaction being quick and swift. "May I have your opinion on revealing the news so early on?" Shion probed politely. In all honesty, Ren bowed to her to be safe of his opinion in case it might offend the pregnant priestess. "I believe you should get quiet for a little while. After all, as sad as it is, my priestess, in the early months miscarriages are high in possibility." Shion flinched at the thought, a hand rushing quickly to her stomach. "Though I promise, priestess, that I will make sure the others and myself take great care of you in the next 7 to 6 months, I can't control that part of nature." Ren swore. Shion nodded in thanks and understanding but remained silent, feeling far away from Ren and everyone else just by the thought of losing her unborn child. "But we shall," Ren carried on, "make sure you are fit and healthy." He bowed to her again. "I wish you luck, my priestess." "Thank you, Ren, but I don't need your luck. Destiny is destiny. A prediction can be changed, as I have learned, but how everything turns on in the end is not luck or anything of the sort." She nodded to him. "You may leave, but I thank you for your worry and luck." She spoke as she turned away from him and climbed back onto her bed. "Yes, my dear priestess," Ren obliged, before leaving the room as quickly as he had entered. As soon as her head hit the pillow, Shion felt sleepy. The terrible taste of vomit was still in her mouth, but had weakened in sourness than before. She forced herself to push away any idea of miscarriage for the moment, and told herself to think of happier things. In fact, she thought of Naruto. He was the main thing on her mind now. It seemed to her that everything she did for her because of Naruto. Although the priestess hadn't seen him in so long, she still felt the same amount of love. "I know that wherever you are," Shion thought as sleep began to take over her, "you've been thinking about me too. Or at least I hope you have." And with the thought spinning in her head, Shion left reality and settled into a dream, feeling secure to be in her own bed. At that moment, someone else was also in their bed, but they weren't sleeping. Naruto was lying on top of the sheets, staring up at the ceiling construction, a confident plan in his head. Overall, his plan seemed pretty easy. He just had to pick the right day and time. 3 in the morning, at the change of the guards on a Wednesday, seemed like a pretty good time to escape. But how would he get back in during the day? Well, there were some pretty steady-looking trees on the other side of the wall. He could just climb them and then use them to jump onto the wall and down to the ground, maybe onto a building's roof if it seemed possible. But so many doubts were there. What if he got caught? What if could remember the way there? That's stupid. He was sure he could. Either way he would get there, he promised himself that. What if Shion didn't want to see him? Why wouldn't she? There was no reason why she wouldn't. Naruto sighed to himself, running his fingers through his hair. He could do it, he knew he could. He was sure he could. Next Wednesday night at 3, in 4 days' time and 13 hours, he would try and get out the village to see Shion. "I promise," he mumbled to himself with a sigh. He'd do it even if it killed him. On the night he had planned, Naruto snuck out of his home and headed to the village exit. With a determined look on his tanned face, Naruto crept through the streets, hidden in its dark shadows. With the exit in sight, Naruto saw the 2 current guards standing in the gapway. They were looking round in confusion, one of them pointing into the village while the other shrugged uselessly. Naruto swallowed before standing up straight and swaggering confidently over to the guards. "We can't just go," moaned an uncomfortable guard, shuffling where he stood. "Look, it's our job to keep watch until 3. It's past that now, so it's not our problem," argued the other guard. "If the next guards aren't here to do their job, that isn't our problem, it's theirs, Ichigo." But the nervous guard was interrupted this time by Naruto, who strutted over proudly and announced, "The next guards are currently late by 20 minutes. I have been ordered to relieve you of your duties." Naruto bowed to them respectfully as he spoke. "Brilliant," the guards said in unison, so desperate that they didn't bother to ask questions, not even why they'd sent a 15-year-old. Naruto stepped out the gateway and stood there with a dry smile, pretending to watch out for anything suspicious, just in case the other guards came back. "If I go," Naruto muttered to himself, "then I'm going to be leaving the village in danger since the actual guards aren't here." Naruto wavered for a moment, shifting his weight from one foot to another. If he stayed right now, he was gonna get caught. Anyway, the guards would surely be here soon, so Naruto took a deep breath and got ready to run out into the night. Then two large, sturdy hands crashed onto his shoulders. The blond boy looked up slowly to see the sneering faces of what must be the current guards, finally arriving. "Oi," smirked one of them, "going for a wonder, are we?" Was the only thing that left the blonde's lips. "A bit dark and late, isn't it?" laughed the other. Naruto was stopped in mid-speech as something hard and hollowed bounced off his head. Ouch, he spat as a throbbing pain began to pound in his head. He looked to the floor to see a conker roll around in the grass before settling down next to his foot. "Hey, what do you?" bellowed one of the angry guards, turning to face the wall and the attacker. Suddenly, there was a roar as hundreds of hard conkers came raining down on Naruto on the guards. The two buff men, alarmed at the attack, let go of the blonde teen's shoulders, setting him free, and turned round to defend themselves. Naruto didn't think twice before jumping to his feet and beginning to speed off quickly before the guards could notice or catch him. Naruto gritted his teeth and gritted his fists tightly as he powered himself forward, putting all his strength, physically and mentally, into his run. Nothing was going to stop him from seeing Shion now. Nothing whatsoever. Naruto crashed through the branches of the wood, swinging himself up and gliding through the air before landing like a cat on the next branch. He pounced over again into the next branch, swinging himself on another branch as he passed it to send him forward further. While Naruto was putting his heart and soul into his journey, his inspiration was lying in bed, now wide awake and uncomfortable. Shion couldn't relax, know what she did. She just felt miserable. Maybe it was just her hormones playing up, but she really couldn't care less about that. The same thought wandered round her head. Naruto. Her heart ached to see his boyish face again, with that cheery, pearly-toothed smile spread to adorable, scarred cheeks. She could remember him as if he was standing right in front of her. The priestess rubbed her stomach with one hand, while she covered her eyes tiredly with the other. She felt sick as well. It was even morning yet, and already Shion could feel her morning sickness building up. She felt groggy and weak, with misery being the thick, unbreakable rope tying everything painfully together. That rope was one hell of a bitch. Shion moaned to herself, turning onto her side and curling her knees up in an attempt to become more comfortable in her current state. She took deep breaths, trying to make the sickening feeling going away, while trying to forget her gloom. While the feeling of sickness in her stomach and throat seemed to tone down, her sorrow did not. She tried her best to think of something else, but she couldn't. The thought was sewn onto her brain and would not tear off no matter what she did. She wanted Naruto. She needed Naruto. She missed Naruto. She craved Naruto. The last one just sounded wrong to her, but it was true. She ached for the calming, skin-tingling touch of his fingertips as they trailed down from her neck, down her chest, across her stomach, and then up her leg, skiing off at her knee. She had giggled with glee when he did that, the feeling being so amazing. She longed to feel his short lips pressing against her so gently, so lovingly, filled with such passion she could feel it throttling her heart. She'd be happy with just the glittering feeling she had been. He embraced her. One of the biggest things she longed from Naruto was just one line, a line she had never forgotten. She had been so miserable, giving up on everything. She had watched, shaking the river water from his gorgeous blonde locks, announcing with such confidence, "I'm not dying." She had argued that he couldn't change what she had seen and that it would happen and he couldn't stop it. At the moment, the idea of him dying made her feel like her insides when ripping apart. He was trying so hard to help her, and had just been ungratefully. "There's just no way. I'll protect you. I'll protect you," he said. He promised he would. He seemed to be such a good promise keeper, but even the best bust had to break one at some point. Shion tried her best to accept the idea that he might not come back to see her again. His life was busier than hers, even though by some it may be seen as less important. That's the one line she wanted here. Just once, just more. Just once more. Shion would love to hear those words leave Naruto's lips. They felt the same as an "I love you." When they had given themselves to each other, and Naruto had used that once again and added, "Trust me," Shion couldn't help but see it as Naruto's way of saying "I love you." Shion removed her pillow from beneath her head and hugged it tightly, sobbing into the plush material. Outside the priestess' bedroom door, Ren stood, ear pressed against the wood. He sighed and shook his head. The skinny young man felt deep gratitude towards the priestess for everything she had done for her village, and how she had changed so much. He honestly believed the young girl finally deserved better than what she had. It was painful to see such a brave girl, who had only just seen the world in an whole, new, different light, was in so much pain. She was trying to help the village by securing the priest's throne with an heir, but now she was left crying because the father wasn't around. Ren couldn't help but ponder over which one of the escorts might be the father, the one whose absence seemed to be causing the priestess so much pain and sorrow. Ren walked away from door, deciding his best intention should include listening through the wood of someone's bedroom door in the middle of the night. He strolled sadly through the palace, racking his brains for some kind of plan to make the priestess happy. The thin man ended strolling right out the building and out into the cold village night air. The coldness was bearable, but annoying, but still Ren carried on walking and thought. Would finding a new love interest for the priestess help? Probably not at the moment, but later on it might. Plus, anyone suitable for her wouldn't want to be tied to while she having or had another man's, or boy's as the case may be, child. Ren's brainstorm was interrupted by the sound of a hubbub coming from the village entrance. Curiously, Ren headed towards the sound of angry voices. "If you have no proof, we cannot let you pass," ordered a threatening guard. So someone on the other side. "Oh come on," groaned the outsider, "go get Shion herself and she'll tell you. You have no right to call her by her birth name. She is the priestess to the likes of you," spat the other guard. "Oh come on," moaned the outsider. Ren focused on the sight, trying to see past the large guards to the person in front of them, hidden from his view. All he could make out was orange clothing and a few spikes of blonde hair. "What seems to be the problem?" he bellowed out to the guards, interrupting their argument with the outsider. They turned around in alarm, revealing the outsider between them. The most noticeable thing about the boy was that he had 3 long, neat scars across each cheek. He was about smaller than him, but probably a little taller than the priestess, looking very out of breath, wearing an orange tracksuit and with a lot of crazy blonde hair spiraling about his head. He looked deeply familiar to Ren. "This boy declares he knows the priestess," explained one of the guards. That's when it clicked, this boy had one of Shion's escorts. But why was he back here? And why did he want the priestess? Wait, Ren mentally hit himself for not coming to the conclusion straight away. This boy must be Shion's love interest. Which means, Ren took a good look at the boy as he admitted it to himself. It meant that this was the father of the future priest or priestess. "You," Ren pointed at the boy, "name?" "Naruto," the boy blinked. "A previous escort of the priestess?" "Yes, I was about 3 months ago," Naruto nodded. Ren let his hand drop and held him head high. "Come with me, Naruto." Naruto walked between the guards and towards Ren. The guards exchanged confused glances as the two walked off, heading towards the palace. "The priestess has missed you," Ren stated. "Has she?" Naruto blinked, a little alarmed. "Deeply. But you should understand why, or so I believe," Ren smirked. Naruto blinked again in confusion but said nothing, just in case he ended looking stupid in front of one of Shion's servants. "I suggest you give Shion a little surprise," Ren giggled as they came to one of the palace walls. He leaned against and pointed up. "Climb it." "Climb it?" Naruto coughed out. "Why?" "Just a little test. Plus it'll make a lovely surprise for the priestess." Ren laughed, while Naruto began to look the wall up and down, from the ground to Shion's window. "Can't I just go the inside way?" Naruto moaned. "If you really want her, you'll climb for her." Ren winked. Naruto rolled his eyes before placing his fingertips round a brick each, while placing a foot on another, and pushed himself up, mumbling words of annoyance. Ren raised an eyebrow as he watched. Well, he thought to himself, it got on with that quick. He must be a strong boy, he admired as Naruto carried on climbing up the building with little difficulty. He still wished he had a rope for support though. It wasn't long until he reached the glass-less window ledge, and pulled himself up so he could balance on it with crossed arms. From below, Ren smiled approvingly, and headed off quietly. Naruto looked round the room. It was exactly how he remembered it, nothing changed in position. Her boutique was cluttered with things, but was still tidier than Naruto's desk at home. Her floor was polished with nothing scattered across her, and every drawer and door was shut tightly. Shion, Naruto hissed towards the bed. He heard a little moan and sleeping figure twitch. He took this as a good sign and said at a normal volume. Shion. The priestess sat up quickly, whizzing round to face Naruto, holding a pillow to her chest. She blinked at him for a second, before she did something Naruto really wasn't expecting. She screamed. Naruto jumped, losing balance on his place on the window sill and falling. Naruto! Shion yelled in a panic, worry rushing through her body, and she jumped out her bed and hurried to the window, looking out desperately, scared of seeing Naruto lying on the ground beneath her, hurt. She was relieved when she saw him hanging on the window ledge by his finger, looking up at her with happy eyes. Hey, he spoke calm and soft. Hey, Shion said in a daydreamy tone, gazing down at him. Naruto broke the eye contact awkwardly and asked, any chance you could give me a hand up? Oh, Shion blushed, quickly grabbing on of his hands and beginning to pull him up on the ledge, sliding him of it until he thumped her down onto her bedroom floor, groaning. Are you okay? She asked gently, bending down to him. Yeah, Naruto giggled, sitting up onto his heels. I'm great now, he whispered, looking her in the eyes deeply. Shion blushed again, smiling foolishly, before crashing a kiss onto his sweet, smiling lips, as tears began to drip down her face. Naruto cupped her face as he kissed back, pulling them apart when he felt a tear fall onto his thumb. Shion, why are you crying? He asked worriedly, wiping away the tears, a tender, caring look on his face. I'm just so happy to see you, she sniffed, before leaning back and placing a kiss on his lips. Their eyes met again. Shion bit her lip thoughtfully, while Naruto fiddled with her locks of hair with his middle and index fingers. Shion calmly began to lean to the side and Naruto tenderly lied her down onto the floor, his hands either side of her head and leaning over her to kiss her passionately. She placed one hand on his shoulder, while the other drifted to his jacket zip and tugged it down as their tongues began to dance like ballerinas. Shion said under his breath, looking away from the girl just as she turned her head to see him. Naruto? Shion began to cry, already worried by how he was acting. Naruto quickly sat up, a look of horror on his face as his head twisted around, and yelled in a frightened, but in no way offensive or mean manner. We only just had. How can you be pregnant in under a minute? Naruto! Shion roared, clenching her fists before sending her foot flying into his face. Baka! I meant you impregnated me the first time, not this time, you idiot. Pregnant. Baby. 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 Shion was pregnant? Naruto couldn't hold in his head. It all seemed too fake, too impossible, too perfect? No, that was one thing it wasn't. This defiantly wasn't perfect. It could be perfect, since Naruto didn't have a family, and this would provide him finally with someone he could love unconditionally and who would love him in the exact same way right back. But Naruto didn't want an adult immediate family. He didn't want a baby, he wanted to be the baby. Not literally, but as the fact of being the baby of the family. Naruto stared at Shion, rubbing his sore cheek in disbelief. His gaze began to make the naked girl feel uncomfortable, causing Shion to her garments and hug them to her chest to hide herself. She sighed, tucking a piece of hair behind her ear, before saying softly, "Thank you." Naruto's eyes flickered with confusion. "I'm happy, Naru." Shion grinned. "Really? How can you be?" Naruto whispered. "I told you." Shion sniffed with glittering eyes, "an heir to my title." Naruto's face twisted into a scowl. He backed away from her, using his legs to hide his own dignity. "You used me?" he squeaked out in horror, his eyes wide, innocent and childlike, misery and hurt smoking up the iris. No, I never did. I wanted to be with you. I still do." Shion panicked, crawling over to him. Naruto's head hung in sadness, his eyes closed tightly shut. They weren't shut to stop any tears, but because he felt he couldn't stand the sight of the priestess at that moment. He rested his legs to the side weakly, his head feeling heavy and tired. Shion cupped his cheek, trying to make him look up at her. "Sweetie, no," she mumbled under her breath. "I guess in a way. I did, but only because I just found you so amazing and brave, with such beautiful fine features that I just." Shion rushed out desperately, her eyes raining on her cheeks. "I just chose you. I chose you because I believed you to be perfect," she whispered to him as her voice broke in her speech. The blonde boy didn't move. "Naruto," she squeaked out, "I love you. I mean it." She bit her lip as tears began to dribble down her face. "I love you so much that when you weren't with me I could have sworn I was going to die." She giggled through her tears. I mean it, Naru, she sniffed, stroking his cheek. I love you. Shion cried harder, pulling the blonde boy's head to her chest and covering it with kisses, her eyes raining on his head like a hurricane. She slowly came to a halt, slowly pushing him back till she could see his face. Shion stroked Naruto's cheek, noticing a tear line running down one cheek, but she didn't say the thought aloud. Naruto's eyes slowly opened but did not meet hers. Instead, that were resting about 2 feet down from her face, her stomach. I guess that's why you didn't want me leaning on your stomach, he murmured with a breath. He swallowed before reaching out his hand to her stomach, resting his palm on the skin. Explains everything really. Shion beamed down at the dear sight with paramour, her own hands covering Naruto's, one holding it there on her stomach. You, Shion's words stuck to her throat painfully as she tried to say something that sounded so easy but hurt her so much. You don't have to be involved. I'd love you to be, but if you don't want to be, then it's okay. Naruto didn't reply, still staring at her stomach. He couldn't do that. He grew up without his parents and he knew how it hurt. He wouldn't want anyone to feel that pain. He couldn't do that, but he also couldn't, nor did he really want to, give up everything he had built. This baby could easily destroy his whole world. But couldn't it create anyone? But this child would be a reason for the village to let him see Shion more often. They wouldn't deprive a child of their father, now would they? Surely they'd taken even more pity on the situation considering Naruto lost his own father. A small smile fell onto Naruto's lips. This wasn't what he had wanted at all, but at the same time how could he ever ask for more? Wasn't this one of those second chance things? Naruto? Shion hiccuped. The blonde quickly looked up at the girl's crying face. Eyes that glittered with liquid met a mixed pair. A set of eyes covered in the mixture of shock, worry, amazement, happiness and pure fright. Naruto smiled up at her, before turning back to her stomach and hands and beginning to place kisses on them both. Shion giggled with glee at the sight, feeling so proud, joyful. Did this mean he accepted everything? Naruto looked back up at her, a wide beam spread so high up his face he looked like the Cheshire Cat. I love you, Shion. He rushed back up, slamming their lips together happily. The priestess wrapped her arms tightly round his neck and Naruto wrapped his round her waist, pushing their naked bodies closer. There was no adventurous touching and feeling. Just a sweet moment of a couple showing they truly loved each other. After a few minutes, they broke apart, leaning their foreheads together and gazing into each other's eyes. So you're okay with it? Shion giggled. Yeah, Naruto laughed back, I am. I'm absolutely fine with it. Shion planted another kiss on his lips. Are you scared? Naruto shook his head firmly with a confident look on his face before pausing, looking away from the priestess. His face relaxed and he nodded. Yeah, just a bit. Shion smiled with understanding and untangled herself to stand up. She took his hand in hers and gently tugged, come to bed. Naruto smiled and stood up himself and let his lover pull him over to her large bed. They climbed under the sheets and Naruto quickly tried to relax, even though his head was thumping with alarm. Shion snuggled up close to the blonde, placing her head on his shoulder. Be honest with me, she sighed happily, tell me your thoughts on all this. All your mental arguments and stuff. Naruto bit his inner cheek, lying on his back with one arm wrapped round Shion's nude body. Honestly, I don't want a baby. Shion stiffened but remained silent, letting him speak. Well, not right now. Later life, yeah, but on the other hand my family are gone. In a way I guess I've grown to accept that, Naruto told her, staring up at the ceiling. But you never get over it. And I miss the kind of parent-child relationship that I don't remember experiencing. I didn't know your dad was dead too. Shion whispered. You mentioned not having a mother, but yeah, they died protecting when I was a baby. They gave their lives so that I could live, like your people did for you. And so, Naruto paused, I guess, because of that, I should be prepared to sacrifice something of mine for my own child. Shion looked up at him, worried and confused. What do you mean? I was just thinking, maybe this would affect my training or something. I won't let it, Shion announced with determination. I'm the priestess, they'll to me. Different village, same respect to be shown. Naruto smirked, still staring at the ceiling. You can try. You sure you can't go back later, like tomorrow? Shion pleaded with a pouted, fiddling with Naruto's jacket collar, tidying the boy up. It was 7 in the morning, and Naruto was getting ready to leave already. He didn't want to go, he just didn't want to get in any trouble. No, Naruto sighed, it's gotta be today. Most lies won't work if I've been missing in over a day. Plus I need to thank a supposed guardian angel, he laughed. Shion frowned in confusion. Well, when I was sneaking out the village I almost got caught by the guards but… Naruto smirked as he explained, someone, or something, distracted them. What did they do? Shion asked, finished tidying his collar and now just brushing him down. They threw stuff, Naruto shrugged. And you don't know who it was? Not a clue. Well, Shion smiled, satisfied with how he looked. I think they were kind of brave. Naruto cocked his head to one side in a quizzical manner. If they had, or did, Shion thought, got caught, then they would be in big trouble, right? I guess, Naruto looked at her fondly, before wrapping his arms round her waist. You've changed a lot, haven't you? Shion wrapped her own arms round the blonde's neck, leaning her head on his shoulder. I hope for your sake that's a good thing, she laughed. Yeah? Naruto sighed, kissing her forehead. Oh what, you didn't like the old me? She asked, pretending to be offended and trying to pull away from the blue-eyed boy. Naruto giggled, pulling her close and not allowing her to leave him. Well, you weren't too nice. But when you opened up, well… He winked at her. Shion stopped struggling and crashed her lips into his. She smiled into the kiss until Naruto slowly pulled away. I really got to go, he whispered. The priestess bit her lip, hers eyes falling down. They raced back up to her lover's face as she said rather desperately. Promise to come back and soon. I can't promise soon, but I'll promise to come back at least before the baby is born, he smiled. Shion smirked at the boy. You must really care for it. For what? Naruto questioned, pecking her on the lips. The baby of course, she giggled, pecking him back. Oh, Naruto stuttered out with an awkward, nervous smile. I'm really proud of you, Shion mumbled, snuggling in Naruto's neck. Naruto gritted his teeth as he felt his cheeks grow hot. Anyway, I better be going, she stuttered again. Shion removed her hood and looked at him straight in the face, confused and worried by his words and actions. I love you, he sang, allowing his arms to slowly loosen around Shion's waist. This reassured the priestess, as she began to smile again. I love you too. They slowly let go of each other with awkward beams. Naruto feeling uncomfortable by the situation, and Shion just feeling nervous and excited all at once. Bye, Naruto nodded, trying to look strong and confident by standing up tall, but sadness glittering in his eyes. Bubby, Shion simpered, before looking down and placing her hands on her stomach. Baby says bye too, she tittered, showing his shiny white teeth. Naruto blinked twice, feeling a little taken aback, before putting a smile and saying it cheery as he could, bye-bye baby. See you soon, giving a little wave to Shion's stomach. Shion giggled again, before hugging herself and telling Naruto sadly, I'm really going to miss you. Naruto looked down sadly. You might want to go before grab you and miss you until you stay, she leered. Naruto laughed weakly, before taking a deep breath and turning on his heel, and strolled to Shion's bedroom window. You know, she began slowly, you could use the front door this time, she told him as he climbed onto the ledge. Windows are more of a thrill, Naruto spoke softly, turning to face her. The priestess' heart skipped a beat at the sight of his face. A small smile, kind, glittering blue eyes, and his hair flying in the window. It reminded her of when he had caught her from falling into the river. The way he had shook the water from his hair. His face so handsome and fine. Bye, Shion, Naruto murmured for the last time, before jumping out the window. Shion's breath caught in her throat as she ran to the window, just checking he had fallen again. To her relief, he was out of sight. She leaned on the ledge, looking out into the village. The sun was still rising, creating a beautiful rainbow sky, with the trees far away in the distance just dancing silhouettes. The wind was cool and calming. As it brushed her cheeks, it felt like soft, sympathetic hands, reassuring her of her worries. She felt at ease as she looked her heart jumping again as Naruto came into sight once again, running through the main street of the village and to the entrance, passing past the guards. The two tall, built men yelled something after Naruto, who turned round with a reply, causing all three to laugh. I wonder if that was about me? Shion mouthed to herself. She carried on staring out into the village, even when Naruto was far away out of sight. She couldn't wait for him to come back already. Shion sighed heavily, finally pulling herself away from the window. She scowled as an odd feeling seemed to wrap round her torso. Shion hissed at the pain, leaning against the nearest wall. She guessed her body was preparing herself for future changes, but she still felt worried. Now she really wished Naruto hadn't left so fast. She would have loved something to hug her while the pain lasted. To her surprise, the pain quickly began to simmer down, and was replaced by an equally uncomfortable feeling. Shion's bright eyes widened, and covered her mouth quickly, before rushing quickly to her private bathroom, almost tripping over her own feet as she did so. Meanwhile, a blonde ninja was racing through the rest, panic rushing through his veins. Everything he had been holding in when he was with Shion was bubbling through his system. He jumped, landing like a cat on the forest floor. Naruto flung his head back and screamed out, long, loud and true. Crows, pigeons and other birds exploded out from the trees, ignoring their rivalry and just trying to get away from the terrible sound that was the ninja's yells. As the angry scream weakened to a croak, Naruto forced himself to stand up straight, his neck aching and his throat feeling a little sore, getting sore the hard he breathed. He flicked a strand of hair from his eye and stared straight ahead, the same question running round his head. What had he got himself into? Everything really did make sense now, and he felt like a true idiot. Naruto felt weak. He wasn't scared to fight, he wasn't afraid of pain, he wasn't even afraid of being alone, but he was afraid of this. Parenthood. Naruto nothing about kids, nothing. He hadn't even really ever babysitted a kid. He didn't know how to handle them, how to teach them, how to care for them. You must really care for it. How could care about someone he'd never met? Someone who wasn't really yet a someone. Naruto wanted to run away from it all, pretend it never happened. But he didn't want to let his parents down. He didn't want to hurt Shion. Naruto felt truly bad about wanting to turn away from it all. What kind of person was he? He'd spent all his years miserable about his parents taken from him, and now wasn't he about the same thing to another? That baby would surely hate him if it grew up with him not around. Maybe it would even reach 20 or something and come and hunt him down in revenge. 20 years' absence couldn't be forgiven with a simple sorry, defiantly, not if it was followed by, I didn't want to be involved because I wanted to be Hokage. Now that was just selfish. Naruto set off into a run again, trying to leave his fear behind. Maybe he shouldn't really be thinking about himself here. Had he even really thought properly about Shion? Wasn't she the one who would take most of the pain in all this? This would surely affect her more than him, but then again, wouldn't she receive most of the pros? She would officially be seen as a woman to her people, and those people would gain respect to her for bearing a child, and her title would be safe. Plus, she'd have a living doll to dress up. What would he get? A new problem, a tiny person who could smash all his dreams, an annoyance. But didn't parents love their kids? Surely he would love his own. They did say women became mothers as soon as they conceive, while men become fathers at the first sight of their child. Naruto stopped again. The thought frightened him. That saying would mean that right now and for the rest of her life, Shion was a mother. 16-year-old Shion, the stroppy girl he had escorted, with now a mother, and it was all down to him. In 5 months, didn't that mean that he come face to face with that child and right second become a father? The whole thought made Naruto sick with fear. It was all really beginning to stick to him now, but at the same time it didn't feel real, it couldn't be real. The blonde shook his head and carried on his way, the entire time trying to think of something else other than Shion and his new sudden certain future. The blonde ninja, who for so long had been training him to be strong, confident and bold, was more terrified than he had ever been in his life. Sakura swore under her breath, before inhaling through her nose to try and keep calm. She was about to knock again, this time a friendly manner, but was interrupted at the sight of something in the corner of her eye. Slowly turning her head, Sakura faced her distraction. To her surprise, her eyes met a familiar blue pair that she recognized straight away, Naruto. The sky-eyed ninja looked very worn out, wheezing heavily as if he had been winded, with leaves and bits of twigs sticking out his blonde mess, sweat dripping down his strawberry red cheeks and half-closed eyes. He stood hunched over, leaning on his knees for balance. For a minute, Naruto didn't seem to be fazed by the sight of his pink-haired friend, then his eyes widened and his heavy breathing froze. Naruto, what you doing up at this time? Sakura asked with raised eyebrows, trying not to show any annoyance in her face or voice. Naruto staged out, bending himself up to stand as straight as he could. He wobbled a bit, suggesting to Sakura that he hadn't just stood for a very long time. What could Naruto say? Oh, I just returned from sneaking out the village to my girlfriend, the priestess, do you remember her? And now I just ran several miles without stopping because I had too much adrenaline. Why did I have so much? Oh, it was the fright of knowing I'm going to be a daddy in a few months. No, of course he couldn't say anything of the sort. He needed a lie, a good lie. I got a phone call from Lee saying he needed some help with moving something. Naruto lied with a smile as wide as his tired face could manage. Sakura scowled, but nodded in acceptance. It would have been nice if you could have dropped me a line saying you wouldn't be in, she hissed at him, folding her arms. I'm sorry, but I didn't think I would be gone so long, Naruto apologized weakly. You never think though, Naruto. You so careless. You're so. Oh, shut up, will you? Naruto yelled at the ranting girl, shoving and stomping past her to get to his front door. He stuffed the slowly rusting key in the lock and began angrily jiggling it around to get it open. Excuse me? Choked Sakura. God, you're annoying. I'm annoying? Coming from you. Go to hell. No, why don't you? God, who pissed in your breakfast this morning? Serious Sakura, Naruto moaned. I don't need this. I've got enough running in my head without your yelling scrambling it about, Naruto roared before sighing weakly, feeling bad about his outburst as the lock clicked, signaling that the door was now open. He held it shut and just stood with his back to Sakura. What do you mean? Sakura replied in a kinder voice. The pink-haired girl was suddenly quizzical about Naruto. Sure, he was always unpredictable, but he had certain traits and at this second it seemed like some of them had been thrown out the window. He was up early for a reason not including his bladder, he had yelled furiously at her, which was rare for him so he usually boiled instead of exploding straight away, and now he was suggesting he had some kind of big problem. When Naruto ever did have a problem to speak about, he would be quite positive about it, saying things like, oh well, and, no matter, and then declaring how he could solve or work around it. At this very moment, nothing like that was being said. Naruto remained silent, staring at the door in front of him, his back to Sakura and not commenting to Sakura's question straight away. Naruto? Sakura stepped closer to the blonde, placing a hand on his shoulder comfortingly. You can tell me, she smiled kindly, the type of a smile only a caring friend can give. Naruto paused and then shook his head. You wouldn't believe me, he sighed, taking the key out his door lock and stuffing it in pocket, plus you'd yell at me. Naruto, if it is something as big as you're making it out to be, then I promise I won't yell at you. I promise. The worried Sakura begged desperately, squeezing his shoulder. You would. I wouldn't. Sakura screamed. You're doing it right now. Naruto half laughed, leaning his head on the door and swallowing hard. He took large, shaking breath, letting his eye relax as he felt then cold door cooling his warm forehead. Sakura breathed out slowly to calm herself down again, staring at her feet as she felt herself slowly calm. This had to be something extreme for her old friend to act like this. Okay, she whispered, I'm good. You can tell me. I won't yell, I truly promise, Naruto sighed to himself, opening the door and stepping in his house before holding the brown rickety wood open for her. Want coffee? Your throat must be sore but you're yelling, he giggled with a small smile. Sakura agreed, strolling into his house and heading straight to his kitchen. Naruto swung his door shut, a loud slam echoing throughout the house. He ruffled his hair agitatedly, feeling incredibly uncomfortable with his current situation. He lazily shuffled after Sakura into the kitchen, slamming his finger on the kettle button to make it boil. Sakura had made herself right at home in the untidy kitchen by taking a seat at the wooden table, rearranging the junk that was scattered upon it into neat piles and placing some bits on a chair to make my room. The two teenagers were silent for a while, the only noises in the room being the sound of the heating kettle, the clang of the metal spoon on the china cups as Naruto spooned in coffee grains and sugar, and the sound of ruffling papers and clanging mugs as Sakura attempted to tidy the table as best she could. Naruto let out another heavy sigh as he poured the kettle and added milk to the mugs before bringing them over to the table, taking the head seat so that Sakura was sitting on his right. They both took a long sip of their warm drink, placing their mugs down at the same time with a quick tap. Naruto stared out in front of him at the piled papers. Sakura turned to look at him with a caring, delicate face. Can you tell me now? Naruto's tanned features mashed into a look of discomfort before slowly whispering, I snuck out the village last night. Sakura blinked. Did you get caught? Is that your problem? Hiding the anger she felt for his stupidity. Naruto shook his head. No. No, I wasn't caught, but, he licked his lips, it's to do with the reason why I snuck out. Sakura bit down on tongue before muttering, what was the reason? Naruto licked his lips again. I went to see Shion. I whispered with honesty. Sakura's eyes slightly and her teeth grit. Shion, but when I got to her village and was in her room. You were in her room? Sakura double-checked in disbelief, her eyebrows raised. Why were you? The pink-haired ninja had a sudden flashback. Wait. And she told me something. And what she told me is the problem, Naruto told her awkwardly, swallowing hard and focusing on not making eye contact with his friend. Sakura's eyes grew to the size of saucers. She had strong feelings that she knew what he was about to tell her. She gritted her teeth, remembering her promise to not yell at him. If he really had done what she was thinking, what was going to happen? What was going to happen to Naruto? To Shion? Naruto's training? What would the village think? Oh God, what will Tsunade think? She'll kill him. She might even cry. What did Shion tell you? Sakura asked sternly, a way she hadn't meant to speak. You wouldn't believe me, Naruto half laughed. I can disagree with that. Sakura muttered, her eyebrows dropping low. Naruto leaned forward, massaging the back of his neck. Sakura, I've done something really, really stupid. I can't believe I didn't understand what she meant before. And now, the blonde boy crashed his forehead to the table in defeat. Oh God. He squeezed his eyes tightly shut as if he was trying to block everything out. There was a long pause. Sakura looked away from her friend and down into her coffee mug. She focused on her breath, her held high but her eyes still on the brown twirling mixture. She brought the mug slowly to her mouth and took a long sip, feeling the warm, cooling liquid pamper her mouth and relax her body. She brought it away from her lips, still holding it close to her, the steam massaging her cheeks and upper lip as she muttered to him, congratulations. Naruto's eyes snapped open and slowly sat up, with time with his blue peepers on Sakura. You're congratulating me? He blinked in shock. Yeah, well, that's what you do when someone is having a baby, Rig. Sakura forced a smile. Naruto stared her in alarm. He waited for her to suddenly burst, grabbing him by the throat and strangling him for his stupidity, screaming at the top on her voice. So, she said in a fake bouncy voice, what are you going to do then? Naruto shrugged. Sneak out the village as soon as I can to see her again. So she is defiantly going along with all this? Sakura checked, placing the mug on the table finally. What do you mean? Naruto blinked again in confusion. As in she's keeping the baby. Oh, Naruto breathed, grabbing his cup and taking a large gulp before speaking again. Yeah. Yeah, she's keeping it, he smirked. Well, her opinions are quite clear, Sakura observed, leaning back in her seat, but what's your opinion? Naruto shrugged again, I don't know. I just want Shion to be happy. And, well, if this makes her happy, then, he paused, looking down at his drink again. Then, his voice shook very slightly, letting his fear slip through ever so slightly. Sakura sat up straight again, staring straight at her friend with a face of alarm and intrigue. Then I'll do whatever it takes to make her happy. Even this, I think, Naruto told her nervously, scratching the back of his neck and giving her a positive smile. Sakura fluttered her lashes as she began to see her old friend in a brand new light. How could he be so sweet and sacrificial to her? Sakura couldn't help but wonder if she had ever given him the chance, been like this towards her. For so long he had had a crush on her and she had always pushed him away. Hey, there was that one point when she announced out of desperation that she loved him, but he was decent enough to not take advantage of her in her bad state. He was truly a sweet boy and because he wasn't so finely good-looking as Sasuke she pushed him away. In the end, this moment, Sakura had just realized that out of the two, Naruto would have been a better guy to date than Sasuke would have ever been. No wonder Shion took to him. And now, here Naruto was, all ready to sacrifice everything for her, he made that clear. He'd destroy everything he'd ever built, ever dreamed about, and all just to see her smile. How could a girl ever ask for more? It was clear to Sakura that after all these years her friend was actually growing up. He was always labeled as immature, but right now he was standing his ground to do the right thing, to destroy his own happiness to keep one person happy. Naruto was ready to annihilate his whole world for Shion. Sakura frowned. Saying that, Sakura now felt that Shion was about to ask too much of Naruto. Let me guess, she wants you to give up everything you have and to go live with her in her village and play doting husband and doting dad, right? Sakura sneered, suddenly hoping to make the, oh, so perfect priestess look so horrid and selfish, like she had always been. No, Naruto shook his head, beaming. She told me I didn't have to be involved with the baby. She even told me when I first woke up this morning that if I wanted we could be just friends and I didn't have to consider the kid anything to do with me. Naruto laughed, his eyes glittering. It kind of freaked me to be honest. Sakura gritted her teeth and faked a smile. So, that spoiled brat like priestess actually properly cared for someone other than herself. I asked if she just didn't want me. Naruto reminisced with a giggle. She started telling me all this stuff and blah and that she loved me and wanted me to be with her but she didn't want me sad. Naruto tittered again. I've never seen her so sweet. I think the baby is making her a little crazy. The blonde boy's smile grew so finely and his eyes had a delicate look to them. Sakura only nodded, looking down at the last of her coffee before glugging it down as a sickly feelings mixed in her stomach. Do you really want this? She asked, not sure what kind of response she was really looking for from the awkward blonde teen. No, Naruto laughed, making Sakura feel very taken aback, but I'd be hypercritic or something if I wasn't part of my own kid's life, right? I mean, all these years I wanted a family and been miserable but honored by the fact that my parents gave their own life so that I could live. Now I've got a chance of a family, even if it's a very big twist on what I actually want. And I've always missed the love of my parents so, Naruto exhaled and shook his head. I can't really take my kid's love away, can I? The blonde boy turned to Sakura to see if she agrees. The pink-haired girl merely nodded again, and mumbled a difficult yes or agreement. Sakura felt odd. She could such a mix of emotions it was making her ill. She felt worried about what was going to happen to her best friend. She felt pride because of how her childish friend was actually reacting to all this. She felt she was jealous of Shion because she had really seen what a great guy Naruto truly was. She felt angry that Naruto could have ever been so stupid as to do something with understand it. She felt happiness, happy that finally Naruto would experience that parent-child love he lost, even if it was going to be the other way round. She just smiled at him, holding all the bad feelings away. No matter what, she promised to herself that she would stand by her good friend, push him in the right direction if needed, and try to make anything easier for him. She still felt sick even so. Naruto decided to keep his new secret between him and Sakura, even though his friend repeatedly tried to make him talk to someone about. Even after a week of knowing, Sakura still pleaded with him to tell someone. She wasn't trying to be annoying, just a good, helpful friend. Sure, she could help him, but an adult could give so much more help to Naruto and Shion than she ever could. She also knew that the reason Naruto wasn't telling any adult wasn't because he didn't think he had to or was too lazy, but because he was scared. He just wouldn't admit it. This was the one time he really needed Kakashi-sensei's or Tsunade's, or any adult really, help, but he just couldn't face them. Naruto never could really handle the look of disgust, misery, betrayal or anguish on people's faces, especially when it was aimed at him. The blonde ninja just wanted to keep all hidden away. You need to tell someone about it. Sakura argued with the blonde father to be one morning, watching him shovel down ramen greedily. I did, Naruto mumbled through his food. You. He laughed, bits of food spitting out of his mouth as he spoke. Sakura shivered at the repulsive sight, flicking a bit of ramen that landed on her cheek away. I mean someone who can actually help you. I don't need help. Naruto scoffed, Shion's the one who will need the help. Sakura shook her head. Naruto was clearly in one of those moods, one that meant he was not going to be serious or mature in any way. But they really didn't realize how right he was. At that very same moment, Shion laid on her bed, tears flowing down her ruby cheeks. She gritted her teeth as more pain zapped through her torso, the feeling like her insides were being ripped out or stretched. This time, after all the hours she had been muffling her sobs, trying to ignore it and trying to be a strong woman about it, she screamed. She screamed out loud and high, her bedroom chandelier rattling as her cries shot through the room. It wasn't long before a gang of 7 alarmed guards burst into the room, worried about the priestess, all of them with similar images in the mind of what could be wrong with the girl to make her scream. Was she being attacked? Was there a fire? A terrible nightmare? Oh surely, 15 years old was too old of an age to be screaming about a nightmare. They all stood for a second, watching in confusion at the sight of their priestess huddled up like a scared insect on her bed, her duvet kicked off of her and now abandoned on the floor. She howled again, shaking the guards from their disbelieving, confused stances and into action, one by one. "Lady Shion, are you okay?" the first guard blurted out as he got to her bed. "My lady, what happened?" the second one questioned in a serious but quick manner. "Stop asking questions and get her out of her," ordered the lead guard, standing tall and orderly, pointing towards the door. "Get her to the medical chambers now." The 6 guards collected the priestess up together, mumbling phrases and words of, "Right, yep, on here. Here we go, watch your head," and, "I think I've just gone deaf." At this moment, Ren came bumbling into the room, only to almost get knocked out by Shion's angry, kicking feet as the guards carried her out the room. "What on earth is going on here?" Ren roared. "What are you doing to the priestess?" he squeaked out, twisting around in circles, looking this way and that in utter confusion. "Kuro," he called to the lead guard, "what's going on here?" Ren raged, running round the men and to their leader. The priestess was screaming. "She seemed to be in pain, so I had my men take her down to the medical chambers," Guard Kuro announced somewhat proudly but fully matter-of-factly. Ren didn't comment or wait for any more details. Instead, the skinny man went scrambling off after the guards to catch up. Running behind them, Shion's head right in sight, Ren quickly began trying to soothe their beloved priestess with kind, reassuring words. "It's okay, my lady. Everything is going to be fine," he puffed as he ran, his words going unheard by the crying priestess who just sobbed and moaned. Shion covered her eyes with arm as more tears burst from her lids and down her bright red cheeks, another painful, shivering scream exploding from her lips. "Naruto," she howled, "where are you when I need you?" The pain was excruciating, stabbing and ripping through her abdomen, spreading down her thighs and up to her hurt heart lungs, crushing them in cruel grip, causing her to choke on frightened tears. As the guards turned, all of them tightening her hold on her, she screamed out again as the movements brought the agony to a new limit. "Ren, help me," she cried, shaking her head, trying to force their pain away from her memory. "It is okay, my lady," Ren repeated, only half believing it himself, "everything is okay." "No it's not," Shion sobbed as the guards entered the medical chambers. "No it's not, no it's not, no it's not, no it's not," she kept on repeating it, again and again and again, as the pain reached her sore throat. "Midori," called one of the men to the nurse, who had been peacefully sitting on a pillow reading a book, mumbling to herself. Midori, with green hair that reached her shoulders and shell brown eyes, looking up in alarm at the sudden disturbance. She dropped her book and hurried to her feet, lifting her long light blue dress out the way of her feet. "Midori, oh thank God, Midori," panicked Ren. "The priestess," he puffed, rushing towards her, "something is wrong. I don't know what to do, Quiet, Midori merely said, before beckoning the guards to a large cushion set on the floor, with a large mountain of more pillows, all different colors but all the same shape, at one end to act as a headrest. "Lie her here," she ordered. The guards quickly obeyed, gently lying the weeping priestess down, earning more yells and moans of agony as they did. "Now out." Midori pointed to the door. "Yes ma'am." They all nodded in unison, jogging out the room and out the door before heading down the hall. Midori turned to Ren, clearing her throat. Ren blinked at her. "What, me too? But he argued desperately. "You are not a woman, so you cannot be here out." Midori's face screwed up into a scowl that could shake any man into following her wishes. Ren paused, looking sadly down and crying Shion. "Out, all right, Ren roared at her, running out the room reluctantly. Once the worrying man had left, Midori's young face relaxed to a gentle one, bending down to Shion, placing her palm on the girl's sweating forehead. "You're burning up," she commented, speaking more to herself than Shion. She removed her hand from Shion's brow, and moved down to the priestess' stomach. Shion flinched at her touch. Midori's frown returned, as she got up and turned away from Shion and headed towards a large black cupboard. She swiftly pulled the doors open, and stretched up onto her tippy toes, knowing exactly where to get what she desired. Midori grabbed a small, dark green, glass bottle from the top shelf, before bending down to a drawer. She opened it quickly and pulled out an empty injecting needle. She stood back up, kicking the drawer shut with one foot, before turning away and leaving the cupboard wide open lazily. She strolled back over to Shion and sat down crossed-legged next to her. She popped the cork from the glass bottle and lowered the needle's silver pin into the container. With her thumb, she raised the sucked, filling the injecting needle with light yellow liquid. "You going feel a slowly prick," she spoke softly to the girl, taking a gently grip on Shion's arm that hard be resting protectively across her throbbing stomach. Midori laid Shion's arm across her lap, before threading the needle into her forearm. Shion only hiccuped, noticing the pain but soon ignoring it as more pain flashed through her abdomen. Midori carefully laid the priestess' arm back down onto the pillow. She sat there silently, just watching the girl cry and scream, tearing dribbling down her necks, 4 words. One desperate plea leaking out between her screams. "Naruto, help me please." She knew Naruto couldn't hear her, and she knew he wouldn't be able to help her. She just wanted him here, with her, holding her, telling her loved her. It didn't matter to her when Ren said everything was going to be okay, but it did matter as Naruto said. If he had said, she would have believed it. Then Shion began to calm, her screams resting into whimpers, her head relaxing and her mouth slowly down and closing, her breathing becoming heavily. The blonde-haired girl relaxed into the pillow as the pain began to cease and way instead replaced by a tingling sensation. "There we go," Midori sang, brushing Shion's hair from eyes, "just relax." Shion's breathing began to calm down as she whispered out, "Okay," lying still finally. "I'm going to ask you a few questions, okay?" Shion nodded slowly. "Have you eaten anything strange lately?" Midori asked as she grabbed a pad and paper she had hidden underneath one of the pillows. No," Shion stuttered softly, "unless you count a chocolate and bacon sandwich." Midori laughed at her. "Is that the only strange combination you've been eating?" she smiled. Shion smirked, her eyes on the ceiling. "Nope," she said rather cheerily, "I had ramen yesterday." "What's so strange about ramen? I never used to like it. Now I can't get enough it." Shion giggled. "Plus yesterday, I had with ketchup, and the day before I mixed syrup in it." "How strange," Midori commented in a rather serious tone. "Have you been experiencing any discomfort other than this episode?" Shion paused, an awkward air quickly strangling the warm room. The priestess swallowed as she got ready to speak, feeling scared all over again, her new cheerful mood falling tragically. "I've been sick in the morning," she whispered, "but I know why that's happening." Midori paused in her writings, staring down at the paper. "How far along are you?" she asked suspiciously. "Almost 4, I think. I've kind of lost count." Midori nodded, jotting it all down. "Wait, no, I know how far." Shion rushed out. "I'm exactly 3 months and 1 week." Midori only nodded again, crossing out what she had previously written and replacing it with 3 mths plus 1 week. "How long have you been UAL active?" "The same amount as I am pregnant." Shion giggled. "I'm guessing the father is Naruto?" "Naruto. Not Ra, Shion corrected. Midori took little notice in this, seeing as she couldn't have much of a difference, and instead repeated the question, "Is Naruto the father?" "Hi." Midori placed her pad and pen down next to her and changed her position so she was sitting on her heels. She reached out and raised Shion's t-shirt. "Tell me about him," she said flatly. Midori, of course, didn't care about the priestess boy. She just wanted Shion to think of something else to cheer her up and keep her relaxed. "He's wonderful," Shion dreamed, a gentle smile on her face full of love for the boy. "He's got a lot of blonde hair and it's always really messy. I don't know why, but it is." She tittered again. "He's got the most beautiful blue eyes and such a cute nose. His features are so youthful, they're just beautiful." As Shion described the guy that hardly ever left her mind, Midori gently ran her fingers over Shion's stomach and abdomen, feeling the swelling and looking for any bruising of any kind. Shion made an HMPH sound, wriggling under the nurse's touch. "Midori," she stuttered, "I think the pain is coming back." "It should do, I'm afraid," Midori sighed, "it's only a short-term painkiller." She looked up at the priestess sympathetically. "How painful is it now?" "It's getting worse pretty quick, I think." Midori nodded, looking back at Shion's stomach. "I'm sorry about this, but I'm going to have to do some light pressing, okay? Shion wriggled again, not keen on the idea. Any movement she made had caused the pain to increase and flash throughout her body like a bolt of lightning. She didn't particularly want to feel that feeling again. I need you to tell me when it hurts, okay? The priestess slowly nodded. The green-haired nurse started her investigation by pressing on the bottom on Shion's ribcage with her thumb. Feel any discomfort? She asked her, looking up at her face, trying to read her answer before it even left her lips. Shion shook her head vigorously, biting the inside of her mouth, feeling uncomfortable about the nurse touching her stomach in such a way. Midori's thumb trailed down a few inches before pressing again. Here? Another shake of the pretty blonde's head. The thumb trailed down to just above Shion's belly button and pressed down. Here? Shion shook her head again, swallowing as she did. Midori moved her thumb to under Shion's belly button and paused. She moved her thumb down a few inches to just above Shion's abdomen. Here? She asked and then pressed down. Ow! Shion yelled, making Midori quickly remove her finger in slight alarm. Yeah, it hurts. Shion wriggled around on the pillow to try make herself comfortable, already knowing that the next touch was going to hurt. Midori's face saddened, and this time she relaxed her smooth feminine palm on Shion's abdomen. She inhaled, feeling terrible as if the conclusion she knew she was about to find would be her fault. She knew, of course, that it was in no way her fault. The only one who could wear the blame was Mother Nature, but just knowing she'd be the one to say it. It made her feel awful. It made it worse that the priestess was so young. Here, she whispered, pressing her hand, trying to keep it still. A look of shock and horror burst onto Shion's pretty face before her body was whizzing over, away from Midori's touch. Shion rolled onto all fours, coughing and spluttering in a messy fashion, choking in between each one. She coughed loudly, before a burning liquid shoot up her throat and poured out her mouth onto the floor, setting fire to her throat and tongue. Her head felt like it was spinning, and her limbs quivered under her weight as she throws up again and again. The nurse just sat where she was, looking on sympathetically and biting her lip. It was all as she had feared. While the young priestess was releasing her guts onto the floor, Naruto was still listening to the same rant he had heard again and again and again for the past week. You've got to tell someone, Sakura ordered, her hands on her hips. She shook her head and sat down next to her friend, looking out at the view in front of them. Naruto and his stubborn pink-haired friend were sitting on top of the fourth Hokage's head, looking out on the beautiful village they called home. Naruto was trying to ignore her friend as best as he could, but her irritating voice seemed impossible to ignore. Kakashi, she stated gently, just tell him. He'll keep it a secret and he can actually help you. Sakura, please. Naruto rubbed his cheeks and around his eyes. I told you I don't need any help. He rolled his eyes. You should tell Tsunade. What? Why? Naruto suddenly panicked, turning. She'll kill me. Yeah, but if there is anyone out there that you ought to tell about this, it's her. Sakura placed her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Isn't she the closest thing you've ever had to a parent all these years? She needs to know. Naruto laughed as he sighed. He licked his lips. She'd be the scariest person to tell. He whispered, she'd kill me. He bit down on his lip as his gently breeze sailed by, brushing Naruto's hair into his face. She'd hate me. I'm sure she wouldn't. Naruto ignored her comment. Of course Tsunade wouldn't hate him, but she would be extremely angry. Just the thought of the look of horror on her face she'd have when he told her he had fathered a child by a priestess was enough to put him off from seeing the real look. You want to know something, Saku? He half smiled. Part of me is kind of happy my parents aren't here right now. Sakura turned to him in surprise. Huh? It was such a strange thing for Naruto to say. He'd never said anything like that in his life. Wouldn't this be a moment where he'd really need them? I don't want to know what they'd think of me. He looked down. I'd hate to see their faces if I told them. Naruto sniffed, running his fingers through his hair to tidy himself up. They'd be so disappointed in me. He sighed, hugging his knees and resting his head on them in defeat. Sakura let her hand drop from his shoulder before saying honestly, I think they'd be really proud of you. What? Came Naruto's muffled scoff. What kind of parent would be proud of this? Sakura ruffled his hair slowly in an affectionate way, feeling each soft strand flick through her fingers. Because most boys would run away. And you're staying with her. Sakura smiled fondly. I don't think you understand how kind and considerate you being towards Shion and the unborn baby. She let her hand drop again, her eyes just watching him. When Naruto finally showed his face, he stared at her sadly. "Sakura," he mumbled, "I'm scared." He gritted his teeth annoyance. "I don't want to be a dad, but," he was defeated again, slamming his head back his knees. I know. Another woman was saying those comforting words to someone at that moment. I know, Midori comforted Shion, holding her in her arms as she cried, "I'm so sorry." "It can't be happening," Shion sobbed in distress. "It can't be," he hiccuped, "it just can't." Midori tries to shush her, but it was of no use. Shion howled in misery, her arms wrapped protectively round her stomach, even though she knew there was no point in doing so. She just wanted everything to be like it was a week ago, where she was in Naruto's arms, their future child resting in her stomach. Maybe, even then, it wasn't resting in the way her and Naruto were. Maybe by then it had already happened and she hadn't known. If she couldn't bring it back, then just wanted to forget all about it, pretend it never happened. She would try, but for the rest of this week she wouldn't be able to. Not for misery but because her body would need rid of it, and there was only one way that was going to happen. Shion finally let go of her stomach and flung her arms found the nurse's shoulders, crying out her misery and broken heart into her shoulder. "Naruto," she sobbed, "cling for dear life, why aren't you here? Why aren't you here when I need you most? I want to see him." Shion roared, standing on her bed and chucking yet another glass vase at Ren's pitiful head. "My lady, the servant was quickly interrupted by a glass bowl smashing at his feet. "I want to see Naruto," the priestess screamed, tears rolling down her cheeks like raindrops on a window. "Now, Lady Shion, please, I'm sure he'll come sooner or later," Ren pleaded before a china bowl flew into his stomach. "I want to see him now." Shion wept, falling to her knees and howling loudly. "For his sake," Ren muttered to himself as he rubbed his bruised stomach, "I hope it's sooner." "Ren," Shion shrieked, making the servant jump violently, "take me to Konoha." It was 10 a.m. when Naruto Uzumaki was awoken from his sleep by a catchy-sounding tapping. Rat-a-tat-tat, tat, rat-a-tat-tat. The blonde ninja forced himself out of his warm, comfy bed, before lazily heading downstairs to his front door, wearing only his red underpants. He yawned heavily as pulled his front door open while the knocker was in the middle of one of their rat-a-tat-tats. Naruto wasn't fazed when he saw who his vis-a-vis was. "Good morning, Naruto-san," Lee greeted in his usual cheerful way, bowing to his friend. Naruto hadn't seen his large-eyed friend for a while now, and at any other time he would have been filled with joy to receive a surprise visit from him. If Lee had chosen to visit him about 3 hours later, Naruto's welcome would have been a lot more pleasant, but his sleepy head and half-shut eyes made any sort of communication as a drag, so he kept his welcome short with his brain not fully registering that missed friend had surprising appeared as his door. Naruto would have been a lot more happy if Lee had come later. "Hi Lee," Naruto said groggily. "I got back from my mission last night," Lee declared happily, "and since I'm still full of energy, I thought I'd come see how you'd been." He grinned. Naruto stared with half-closed eyes. "Leaning on the door tiredly, at 10 in the morning? Most people are up by 8, Naru-san." Lee chuckled. Naruto groaned, but a small smile spread across his face. "Come on in." "Why thank you, Naruto-san." Lee thanked politely as he bounced into his friend's home. "You look very tired." "Aren't you sleeping well?" he asked as the blonde ninja closed the front door. "To be honest, no. I've had a lot on my mind recently." Naruto sighed, his smile getting bigger. "Oh well, I guess it's worth it in a way," he said, sounding much more awake, before leading him and his friend to his kitchen. "What's worth it?" Lee cocked his head to the side like a confused dog as he followed Naruto. "You wouldn't believe me." Naruto laughed as the two boys entered the kitchen. "I'm not sure if I believe me." "Want a coffee or tea?" "Tea, please Naruto-san." Lee bowed again, before taking a seat at the kitchen table. "I'm guessing I've missed a lot then?" "No kidding," Naruto giggled, switching the kettle on and searching around for cups. "God, so much has happened in the past few weeks." "What's happened then?" Lee asked curiously. "If you don't mind me asking." Naruto's smile dropped as he spooned the grains into the cups. "Well, you know the priestess?" he began slowly. "Yes, the one we escorted?" Well, you know I kind of liked her all." Naruto bit down on his tongue as he poured the kettle. Lee nodded, even though Naruto couldn't see with his back turned to him. Either way, Naruto carried on. Naruto poured in the milk and carried the mugs to the table. Well, the night before you left for your mission, you sneaked out the village to see her. Lee beamed at his friend. Naruto blinked. How'd you know? Lee laughed at him and winked. Let's just say, I gave you a little hand in getting out. Naruto sat down, staring at Lee in a daze, completely confused by what he meant. He frowned, pursing his lips before pushing them into a straight line as he thought. Then he remembered. Did you throw the conkers at the guards? He almost whispered in surprise. Lee smirked and nodded slowly. Really? Naruto choked on his own air. You, Rock Lee, throw conkers at the guards? Yep, Lee cheered, a hint of guilt in his voice. I saw you sneak out. Naruto immediately frowned, and there he had been thinking he had snuck out so brilliantly. Except the part where he got caught by the guards. So I followed you. Stalker, Naruto smirked. And when I saw you trying to get out the village, I remember overhearing a conversation between you and Kakashi. I guessed that you were going to see Shion, so, Lee shrugged, I gave you a little help. You know, for the sake of love, Lee giggled, sipping his tea. Naruto raised an eyebrow before thanking his friend with great gratitude. And wait? Lee breathed after a long sip of tea. I take it something happened when you went to see Shion? Naruto nodded. A lot happened. But he's what she told me that has left me restless and shit. Lee rolled his eyes at Naruto's curse, but said nothing and allowed him to speak. It was just, wow, and, God, I don't know if it's the biggest mistake of my life or if it will be the best thing I've even done. Naruto leaned back in his chair, massaging his neck with his hands and screwing up his eyes. What are you talking about? Lee questioned, suddenly feeling quite worried about his friend. Lee's mind wondered for a moment, conjuring up a list of things Naruto could have done, and a linking list of things Shion could have told him. His lists got bigger when Naruto rested his gaze straight into Lee's dark eyes. Even so, he hadn't been expecting Naruto to say what he did. Shion is pregnant. Lee froze, his eyes frozen on Naruto's blues. There was a long pause with Lee still trying to understand the idea, and Naruto trying to think of something else to say. Nothing came to mind, and Lee's own mind carried on ticking, before his thoughts exploded past his lips. Lee quickly stood up and shrieked loudly. Why aren't you with her now then? At his friend, who jumped out his seat and fell to the floor in alarm, the chair going with him. What? Naruto blurted out. If she's pregnant, then why are you here? Lee roared. You should be with her. It is the right and duty of the father to stand by the woman who carries his child. It is an honor to lie your life down to someone? Naruto giggled nervously as he untangled himself from the legs of the chair, uneased by Lee's eruption. Naruto, the black-haired ninja yelled, in these circumstances it is an honor to give up everything to look after someone in a time of need. It is a greater honor to be a parent to a following generation. Wait a second, Naruto jumped up from the floor. Did you tell me that I have to give up everything? As in everything I've been working for? It's an honor. Stop talking about honors. Naruto began to pull at his own hair in anguish. And your duty? I can't. I'm going to Hokage. I'm going to follow in my father's footsteps. Naruto yelled angrily at his friend. You don't have to be Hokage to follow your father's footsteps, Naruto, Lee told him sternly. Yes I do. No, you don't. Your father have up his own life for his child, you. Naruto let his fingers run out his hair, his arms going limp at his sides. If you really want to follow in your father's footsteps, then give up your own dream for your own child. Lee smiled gently, sitting back down at the table, clasping his hands round his teacup. Lee was right. He was right about everything, even though Naruto didn't really want to admit that. If it was truly going to be like his father and follow in his footsteps, then he should give something massive up from someone he loves. Or will love. Maybe, even though he had met his future child, he did love it, or at least the idea of it. Naruto wasn't sure, he didn't know, and he defiantly didn't understand. It was all so difficult for him, as it be for any high-hoping teenaged boy in his situation, but that didn't give him any excuse to be selfish. Naruto gave a shaky sigh before whispering, it's not that easy though. So give up something like that. Is it easier to give up your life? Lee sipped his coffee. At the moment, a tear ran down Naruto's cheek. He picked up his hair from the kitchen floor and sat back down, more tears following the first. Lee placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder. Can I be completely honest with you, Lee-san? Naruto sniffed. Of course. I won't laugh and I promise I won't repeat a thing. Lee spoke with the kindles of a mother. I'm scared. But when I say scared I mean really. Naruto swallowed. Really, really scared. But not just because I'm going to be, you know, a dad, but. Actually I'm not scared about that part. I'm worried, but not exactly scared. In a way, I'm kind of happy. I mean, I'll have a family again. Naruto giggled weakly, wiping his tears away. What are you scared to have then? Probed Lee softly, giving Naruto's shoulder a squeeze. That I'll mess up. That I won't make Shion happy. Naruto swallowed, covering his eyes with his hands, and I already have. Naruto gritted his teeth. You're right. I should be there, and I should give up everything and. Naruto coughed, and I haven't made Shion. She told me she was miserable when I wasn't with her. And I'm still not there. Naruto placed his head onto the table and sobbed. Lee tenderly stroked Naruto's head. Don't cry, Naru. Lee comforted him melodiously. It's not too late to put everything right. Naruto's head shoot up from the table. You're right. Naruto smiled at him with pure joy. How could I be so stupid? You're so right. All I have to do is tell Tsunade the situation and I'm sure she'll let me leave and, Naruto paused, she'll probably maim me first. But afterwards I can be Shion. That's it Naruto. Lee praised, punching the sky with his first. Held to being Hokage. Naruto declared loudly, I'm gonna be a dad. Go Naruto. Naruto jumped up from his chair and headed to the front door. Naruto. Lee called, running after him. You might want to put some clothes on first. Oh yeah. Naruto hastily made his way upstairs into his room, ripping his closet door open and grabbing the orange tracksuit and quickly pulling the pants and jacket on. Spraying deodorant with one hand and combing his hair with other, Naruto quickly checked himself in the mirror, before crazily heading back out the room to find Lee waiting at the foot of the stairs for him. The blonde ninja whizzed past him, heading to the wooden front door. Naruto triumphantly dragged the door open, before freezing as he looked out into the street in front of him. The four guards carefully placed the chariot down. Shion, sitting comfortably on top with Ren by her side, watched Naruto with a blank expression. The priestess looked tidy, with her hair tied back in a neat, tight pony. She wore lipstick and mascara but nothing else on her pale face. Her cheeks had a blotchy blush to them that stood out madly against her porcelain skin. Shion wore a rather thin, long pastel yellow dress that reached down to her ankles. Naruto immediately recognized as one of night dresses he's seen her wear, but he, of course, was confused to why she had chosen to wear out of bed. He could remember seeing her wear it and thinking how beautiful and feminine she looked in it, but today it looked most unflattering against her sickly skin. If Naruto had managed to turn his eyes away from Shion for just a second, he would have seen Tsunade, standing not far behind the chariot, her arms folded in a confused and irritated expression on her face. She remained silent. Shion rose from her seat, lifting up her dress so she didn't tread on it as she stepped out of the chariot daintily. Naruto carried on staring in pure shock at it, not even noticing Lee's gasp of, wow, as he looked the priestess up and down. Shion walked slowly over to Naruto, her eyes looking tired and sad. She stopped in front of his doorstep, just a foot away from him. Shion, Naruto whispered. Naruto? Shion muttered, bowing to him. I need to. She paused, taking a deep breath. To speak to you urgently? Her voice was shaky and weak as she spoke. Naruto nodded quickly, before turning his head to Lee. I'll come visit later, he told him with a small smile. Lee beamed at him proudly but said nothing. He bowed to his friend before running off. Guards. Order Ren. Surround the building and keep a close watch. Naruto swiveled his head from side to side as he saw the four guards take a place around the outside of his house. May I come in? Shion asked meekly. Naruto shook himself from his daze. Yes. Yes of course, come in, he stuttered, stepping out the way of the door to allow his lover to enter his house. He then shut the door behind them, making sure not to look out in the street in case he caught anyone's eyes. He turned round to face Shion. The young priestess' face finally was showing expression as tears run her cheeks. Shion? Naruto mumbled, quickly pulling her into an embrace. Shion, what's wrong? The blonde girl began to howl loudly into Naruto's shoulder, clinging to him desperate. Shion, please, tell me what's wrong, Naruto whispered in her ears. Please, you're scaring me, The blonde ninja gently kissed her hair, tightening his worried hold on her. Shion slowly lifted her head to look at him. Her lips moved but no words came out. She bit down on her lip as more tears flew from her eyes. Naruto placed his hand onto the back of her head and kissed her forehead lovingly, holding his lips. "You," Shion muttered in a shaky breath. You weren't there," she stuttered through her tears. I know. Naruto shushed her, not thinking he understood her tears. Pregnant woman got over emotional, right? This must be some mood swing. But I promise, I'll always be here for you in the baby form now on. Okay, he smiled gently. Naruto was confused when the look on Shion's adorable face became sadder and she began to cry harder. "No," she coughed. No, Naru, you don't understand," she sobbed loudly. Naruto screwed up his eyes on confusion. Huh? What? Don't you want me to be there for you? He asked in a muddle. No, I need you. Bald, I really need you, Naru. Shion began to cough violently through her tears. Shushing her, rubbing her back, his hand falling from her head to the back of her neck. He began to place gentle kisses on forehead and eyelids in a loving fashion. Shion began to calm down, relaxing under her boyfriend's love. I need to tell you something, she states unobtrusively in a calm fashion, giving a little sniff. What is it? Naruto uttered, still kissing her forehead. Shion took a deep breath, closing her eyes gently, trying to focus on the feeling Naruto's cool lips against her skin. Something happened. Naruto halted his kisses, looking down at her with a serious, worried expression. Shion's own eyes quickly looking up at him. What's wrong? Naruto's hands dropped around her and to his sides, fearing for what she might say. Shion swallowed, looking down and clasping his hands in hers. Naruto squeezed them. I'm sorry, she whispered in misery, but, Naruto mouthed. 4 days ago, Shion swallowed, I had a miscarriage. Naruto turned to ice at her words. He stared at her in horror, feeling his body go numb with shock, his heartbeat racing like crazy. He could be true, could it? In just 4 words, Naruto felt like his soul had been ripped from him, body from sharp, slashing knives. The most the stunned boy could do at that moment was mouth the word, what, over and over, his hands becoming limp in hers. Please don't hate me. Shion panicked. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear. Shion silenced and Naruto kneeled down in front of her, his eyes on stomach. He dropped down so he was face to face with Shion's empty stomach. Like his, Shion's hands went limp, allowing Naruto to let one hand break free. He placed it gently on stomach, not quite believing there was nothing there. Nothing there of his, anyway. Empty. Gone. Naruto stood back up, one hand still holding Shion's as he watched as her relaxed attitude dropped once again as she broke down in front of him, dropping her head so her hair covered teary face. It took a while for Naruto to react to the situation, dragging his hand out of Shion's and quickly pulling her close to him again, placing her head on his shoulder with one hand, with the other wrapped tightly around her waist, fearing to let her go in case he lost her too. The blonde ninja, with his heart shattering between his ribcage, buried his head in Shion's neck. The priestess quickly wrapped her arms round Naruto's tanned neck in an insecure embrace. Shion had been wanting to be in Naruto's arms once again since he left, but this wasn't the way she wanted it to be. She didn't want to be soaking his orange jacket with her tears of sorrow while he could do nothing but hold her in alarm. She wanted to be like it was not so long ago, in each other's arm with their unborn child between them, making them forever linked for life. As Shion's loud cries began to calm, Naruto lifted his heavy head from her shoulder, and the priestess did the same. They looked at each other, both with pure sadness in their eyes. Once again, Naruto unthreaded his arms from around Shion and then unthreaded hers. He held the hands tightly together, bringing hers to his lips and kissing with devotion. It's okay, he lied softly. You've still got me, he kissed her thumbs. Shion whimpered, but a smile stretched across her face. She nodded weakly, sniffing hard. Naruto? She spoke weakly. Yes, my precious? He didn't know why he said that. Maybe he just wasn't thinking straight, or maybe he thought using a term of endearment would lighten the situation. Maybe he just wanted her to know he still loved her with all his broken heart and nothing was going to destroy that, not even this tragedy. Nothing would stop him from loving his pretty precocious priestess. His heart was hers, broken or not. Shion before she spoke, I want our baby back. Naruto blinked. Shion, bring back my baby." The blonde-haired girl began to sob again. "Shion, I can't, please. Naruto's fast words were cut off as Shion kissed him violently, sending him backwards, landing on the wooden floor with a loud thump. The priestess kissed love desperately, her hands running through his hair and tugging. As Naruto moaned into the kiss, he suddenly realized what was happened. He shook his head of the kiss, clamping his lips shut and giving her sad look. Shion scowled with annoyance, bending her head down to his neck and beginning to chew painfully at the skin. Naruto struggled under bites. "Stop," he groaned. "Shion-chan, stop it. This won't bring it back. Life doesn't work like that." Naruto twitched at Shion to a deep bite into his skin at his words. "Shion, listen to me," Naruto hissed angrily. "I know what you're doing." "I'm not," Shion whispered meekly. She lifted herself up so she was leaning over him, looking deep into his eyes. "I just want to make you happy." And I want to be happy," she carried on with glassy eyes, her voice so innocent, like a child's. "Please. Maybe even if it only makes me happy for a moment." Shion's hand drifted to the zip of Naruto's jacket. "There's a possibility that'll make happy forever." She smiled gently, pulling the zip down. "Shion, stop." Naruto quickly shoved his seducer off him and jumped to his feet, zipping his jumper back up while looking down at the girl. "You said you were happy we were having a baby." Shion yelled up at him. "I was, but not having a baby anymore, are we? We can. For God's sake, I told you, I didn't get into this situation exactly willingly. If I had the choice, I wouldn't have." Naruto froze in mid-sentence, watching the rejected girl sitting on his floor. "If you had the choice?" Shion finished for him. "You wouldn't have gotten me pregnant at all." She looked down and sighed. "Yeah?" Naruto muttered, sitting down cross-legged on the floor. "But I was happy," he whispered to her. "The baby meant a lot to me." "Then why can't we try again?" Shion questioned him frantically. Naruto struggled for words. He didn't have an answer for her. There was so many reasons why they shouldn't and they couldn't, but part of him kind of wanted it. Why did he want it though? As he stared at Shion, his brain stopped ticking and froze. In statue-like state, Shion crawled back over to him and kissed him again, this time gently and lovingly. The boy's statue cracked, and he wrapped his arms back round her, pulling her down on top of him, caressing her arms sweetly. With his mind still swirling like a cauldron, Naruto settled on one idea. Whatever happens, happens. On the sudden decision, Naruto had whisked Shion into his arms and carried her upstairs bridal style, the priestess giggling through her still running tears. "Are we really going to do this again?" she asked with a voice full of hope. Naruto's lame reply was, apparently, before placing a hard kiss onto her lips. "Whatever happens, happens," he whispered to her with a smirk, before carrying her to his room and throwing her down on the bed. Shion giggled like crazy, her smile wide and her tears halted. She grabbed Naruto by the collar and pulled him on top of her, quickly unzipping his jacket, of which he discarded to the corner of his room, his shirt following shortly after. Naruto quickly ran over to the window and closed it and the curtains to save themselves from any peeps, before jumping back onto Shion, who wrapped her loving arms round his neck. Their breath was labored, their kisses were rough and heated as the last of the clothes were thrust aside and onto the floor, forgotten. Their hands wandered crazily, while the blonde ninja quickly but gently forced his quivering member into Shion's access. The priest groaned with anticipation as Naruto began to thrust in and out of her small, pleading body. Remembering that people were still outside, Shion bit down onto Naruto's neck as she suppressed a scream of ecstasy, causing the blonde boy to hiss at the pain. 30 minutes later, the room was boiling with the windows closed and the curtains shut, and the only sound was over heavy breathing. Naruto and Shion were lying on the young ninja's bed, utterly spent, squished close together in the single with nothing hiding their dignity but Naruto's sheets. Their breath was heavy and quick, while sweat still ran down their worn-out bodies and their eyes stared straight at the ceiling. Shion paused for breath. "I missed this." Naruto giggled at his lover with a bright smile, brushing some his blonde hair from his eyes. True to say he had missed it too, but he couldn't help but find it suddenly weird to know that, this time, there wasn't a life sleeping soundly between them while they made love. Shouldn't that be weird, with a pregnant woman? Somehow that he began so normal in the teenager's head, so normal it suddenly seemed wrong to him. He still missed it though. Naruto's smile fell. All that time he had been arguing in his head about whether he wanted to be a father or not, those tiny mini-seconds where he had actually sat there and considered abandoning Shion and hiding just to keep away from fatherhood. Now that it was suddenly all cruelly ripped away from him by the nasty forces known as nature, he missed the feeling of impending fatherhood. Even so, he still felt coerced to protect and be with Shion. How the spoiled priestess had changed in his eyes. From just a bitch to the girl that he could actually see himself marrying one day. And that girl used to be Sakura. Naruto may have felt a force in himself to protect and take care of Shion, but there was very little compelling him to impregnate her a second time. It may be what Shion wanted, but now he wasn't forced into the responsibility he didn't really want it. Not at the moment anyway. At least he knew he could have a family one day, and one day was probably better than now. Wouldn't it be better if he fully completed his training, succeeded his goal and became Hokage and then married Shion and had a baby? That baby could grow up proud to say his or her mother was a wise priestess and his or her father a strong Hokage who saved his or her mother. If they had a child right now, what would their child say? My mummy is a great priestess. What about your daddy? Oh, him? He once escorted her on a mission and saved her and stuff. He was going to be Hokage but they had me, so now he kind of just the guy who stands next to my mum in offerings and ceremonies. Naruto rushed up into a sitting position at the sudden thought. Is that all he would be? If he gave up everything to be a father, would he just be that guy that stood next to Shion in ceremonies? Would he worth nothing except for the title, the husband of the priestess? Some may see that as a proud title to have, but isn't also somewhat offensive? Nothing better to be known as except as someone else's spouse. Naru? Shion squeaked worriedly, are you okay? Yeah, Naruto spat in a pant. I just got dizzy for a second there. He turned to look down at the beautiful girl, giving her a reassuring smile before slowly laying down next to her. Naru? She asked again, receiving a reply of, from the said boy, can I stay with you for a while? Naruto frowned, what do you mean? Like, can I stay here with you for, I don't know, a week of a month? So we can see more of each other? Shion looked at him pleadingly with her large eyes. I dunno, I'm going to be honest and say that I wouldn't be comfortable with all the guards. Oh, there won't be any guards. Shion grinned. I bought Midori and Lady Naomi. Who's Midori and Naomi? Asked a confused and slightly suspicious Naruto, squinting his eyes. Oh, Midori is a nurse and Naomi is. Well, you know how princesses have ladies in waiting? Yeah, she's kind of like that kind of. Shion insisted, to make it clear Naruto knew there was a difference. Well, I don't know about them either. Please Naruto, let me stay. I'll be like your little wife if you want. Shion begged, wrapping her arms round his neck and fluttering her long lashes. You playing the little wife? I can't imagine that, the blonde ninja giggled. I'd do for you. What about Midori and Naomi? And why exactly do they need to be here? Naruto asked. They protect me. Naomi is a Wicca woman or whatever, so she'll cast spells to protect me and Midori. Wicca woman? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Kind of like a witch, Shion explained flatly. Right, nodded an unimpressed Naruto. And Midori is, like I said, a nurse. She also acts like a mother in ways only she isn't in charge of me. Naruto sighed, closing his eyes and rubbing his brow. I still don't know. I'll be good. Shion shuffled a little closer, please. It'll be fun. She planted a sweet kiss on his cheek, please. Okay, but on one condition, Naruto smirked. You really do have to play as my little wifey, okay? Shion blinked, a little confused. Okay, but can I ask you one thing? Sure, what does a little wifey do? Naruto started laughing at her lovingly, annoying Shion for her lack of common knowledge. Okay, this is how it goes: you cook, you clean, you sew and you love. Simple. Naruto beamed at her. Shion blinked again. Okay, I can do that. Good to know. Naruto giggled, giving her gently kiss on the lips. Shion smiled delicately as him, before sitting up and climbing out of bed. As she began to redress herself, also sat back up, this time watching with intrigue and a perverted smile. What are you doing? He questioned slowly. Getting dressed so I can go tell the others our plan, she explained, picking up her red bra from the floor and pulling it on. By the way, how long shall I stay? A month? I'll think you'll get bored. I won't. 2 weeks? Shion paused, considering Naruto's offer before nodding happily. 2 weeks of being with you is good. Then she turned round, her smiling suddenly dropping. "Don't you want me?" she pouted sadly. "Of course I do," Naruto told her gently, "I just don't want you to get bored or anything." "I won't get bored," Shion winked. "We'll be really busy." The priestess patted stomach before silently giggling. "Shion, I told you," Naruto began sadly only to be cut off. "Naruto, think of it this way." The priestess sat down on the bed, only in her underwear. "As you carried me up here, you said, whatever happens, happens, so why not let Kami decide? If he really thinks she should have a baby, then I'll become pregnant again, and if does not, then I won't. Simply as." Naruto gritted his teeth and looked away from her with a poker face. Shion was unfazed, and simply got up the bed with a sparky jump. Shion heaved another heavy sigh even so, before pulling her long yellow dress over her head. Naruto smiled as he looked her up and down in the feminine dress once again. Their latest activities had put some color into Shion, making the dress look more flattering than sickly like earlier. Once she was fully dressed, she announced to Naruto that she was going to talk to Ren, her lead servant, just as the ninja began to redressing himself. He muttered an okay, but replied with nothing else. Shion ran out the room and down the stairs excitedly, bursting out the front door and running towards the chariot, of which Ren was still sitting, impatiently. "Ren," was Shion's greeting to her servant, "I shall be staying here for 2 weeks. Please unload by packing and on the doorstop." 2 weeks, panicked the servant. "My mistress, why so long? Surely you wouldn't want to stay?" Ren looked round at the scenery with a face of disgust. "Here for so long? What's wrong with her?" Shion demanded. "I think it's lovely," Shion sulked, before heading quickly back inside to find Naruto. She called to him up the stairs before ordering her boyfriend, "Come help Ren." "Help him what?" Naruto yelled back, pulling on his joggers. "Help him bring my packing in." Shion sighed in a yell, as if this was obvious. "Is there really that much?" Naruto asked, scrambling out the room and to the top of his stairs. "There's not much. I just thought that." Shion smirked at her lover, fluttering her lashes once again, "that since I was being your little wife, you should be my husband and carry the heavy things." The priestess pouted. Naruto sighed sadly, before plodding down the stairs, acting as if his body weighed 1,000,000 tons. The next 2 weeks would surely be interesting. When Shion had ordered Naruto to help Ren bring her belongings in, the blonde ninja hadn't imagined that there would be so much of it. Suitcases, trunks, bags. What didn't Shion bring with her? She must have brought every belonging she owned plus every single kitchen sink and bathroom sink in her village. That's a lot of sinks. But it wasn't only Shion's load of stuff he had to haul in, he had to bring Shion's beloved, ladies-in-waiting's belongings in too. They hadn't packed as much as Shion, but hell, they had brought a lot even so. One of them even brought a bloody table. What, did they think Naruto wouldn't have a single bloody table in his house? Did he think money was that tight for him? It was a rather special table though, with dark work and heavy carvings in it. Maybe they had some statue to place on it in memory or respect since they brought a table. The blonde ninja couldn't help but hope that they had also brought camp beds with them too. Otherwise they'd be sleeping on the sofa or floor, which sounded a little comfortable. Naruto actually managed to whisper to Shion about the Midori and Naomi's sleeping arrangements whilst he was carrying that bloody dark brown wooden table into his house, of which Lady Shion replied, "Don't be absorbed," she scoffed, tutting at him as she herself hauled in one of Midori's bags. "You shall be a nice gentleman, one that I can be proud of, and give them the bed and you shall sleep on the floor." She scowled. "I want them to think highly of you, and at most to like you." But Shion planted a loving kiss on his cheek. "I'm sure you'll do everything right," she spoke fondly, before heading back to Naruto's kitchen. Following that conversation, Naruto's first question that came to him was where was Shion going to sleep? "Oh great," thought Naruto, "I guess I'll be sleeping on the cold floor for the next few weeks." At first look, Naruto had immediately thought that the two women looked like a pair of ugly stepsisters or something from fairy tales. Naomi and Midori were strange women in the fact that they seemed to be polar opposites on appearance. Considering the fact they looked so different, they sure did seem to act very similar. Naruto didn't lay eyes on them until all their belongings had been placed in his living room. The two stubborn-looking women had stepped straight into his house without invitation, Naomi first and Midori second, and looked round with an eyebrow raised each. Naomi held her hands clasped in front of her, while Midori kept her clasped behind her skinny back. When they finally settled their unimpressed eyes on Naruto, their eyebrows dropped. "And this is he?" Midori asked. "The escort and romancer?" Naomi checked, her words sounding almost jokey, but her face reading the exact opposite. Midori paced over to Naruto, her held eye. "Yes." Shion nodded proudly, joined Naruto's side in the doorway to the living room. "This is Naruto." Shion linked her arm through in and placed the other on his shoulder, a bright smile on her face. Naruto had a nervous smile and nod to the woman that made him feel uncomfortable and small at first sight. Midori was tall and curvaceous, with small single-lidded brown eyes and long emerald green hair. Her arms and legs looked skeletal, but her body looked built and healthy, and so did her skin. She was quite beautiful really, and would be even better looking if she had smiled, but when even Naruto saw her she had an expression that mixed angry, confident, serious and bored all at once. She wore a tight light green kimono that only reached her knees, and wore flat white shoes on her petite feet. There wasn't a single crease in her clothes, not a speck of dirty on her shoes and not a single hair out of place on her head. She looked like she had been newly scrubbed and painted. Now, if Naruto remembered correctly, Shion had said that Midori was her nurse. With such cleanliness about her, she could almost seem like the perfect nurse, but her dark, far away, self-confident demeanor sort of put Naruto off the idea of having her ever look after him. Naruto had a feeling that she was the type of doctor who didn't really listen to her patients all that much. She noted down symptoms and then everything else was done to her word. Anything the patient said was nothing and useless to her. Naomi, on the hand, was small, only about 4 feet 8 in height, and was extremely large in weight with S that seemed to mold into one massive chest. Her eyes were large and stretched, and her golden hair was pulled tightly back in a messy bun on top of her head. Her rosy cheeks were large and her lips were in a firm, constant pout. Naomi wore a kimono like Midori, but hers was blue with a yellow waistband and reached down to her toes, hiding her feet. She looked cuddly and soft, but Naruto could tell that a hug from her was very awkward, uncomfortable hug, and it wouldn't be given too willingly. Naruto held a hand for the women to shake in greeting, but this was ignored as the women began to circle him curiously. Naruto swallowed hard in worry as they observed the couple in a suspicious way. Their eyes seemed to be taking him apart bit by bit and working out all his tics and talks and cracks. "He's not very tall. 5 feet 4 are you?" Naomi asked, as if he's secretly a midget on stilts or something. "If boys take after him, this will unfortunate, but for girls a small height should be fine," Midori butted in before Naruto could speak, leaving him open-mouthed. What on earth was wrong with his height? 5 feet 4 was a good, proud height to be. Come to think of it, he was 5 feet 5 actually and extra inch. Naruto was only a few inches smaller than the other boys he knew who stood at 5 feet 8 and 9. Gaara, a friend of his, was actually smaller than him by an inch or two, but today Naruto wasn't exactly counting him. But 4 inches, that wasn't much of a difference, now was it? Anyway, why does height matter? It doesn't matter as your body is little or big, it's how you use it. Naruto was glad he hadn't said that aloud, for that could have been taken in more ways than one. "Colorings are different," Naomi announced in a deep, unsubtle voice. "Suggests mixed race?" Midori stated like it was a question to the large woman, as they walked closer to the linked couple. Naruto, without even realizing he was, began to step back, Shion stepping back with him nervously. "Skin color suggests that there are redheads or light brunettes in family," Naomi carried on. "Blondes are clearly stronger in blood. He's wearing orange," Midori smirked. "He must be confident and immature," spoke Midori. "Black may suggested a dark past. Is your past dark?" Midori asked nosily. "And that matters to you why?" Naruto scoffed rudely, receiving a hard slap on the chest from Shion. "Feisty. Strong will, that's good," Naomi carried on, ignoring Naruto's comment. "He's protect Shion well." "He doesn't look very strong," Midori pointed out, sounding depressed. "What?" Naruto roared, only to be ignored again. "Surely we can have him built to be the perfect protector," Naomi carried on. "Doesn't seem built, small in height. Probably small manhood." Naruto gritted his teeth, determined to keep his temper as best as he could, just for Shion. "He's alright, broken slightly, but if he could hold it together everything would be fine." Naruto dreaded living with these horrible, annoying, creepy women for 2 weeks. Tea or coffee, Midori-sama? Naomi-sama? He offered, wearing a fake smile of pleasure, putting the penis matter away for the time being. For the sake of Shion. Tea. No sugar, the two women said quickly and instructively in unison. Naruto did his best, told his smile as Shion slowly let him go so he could head to the kitchen and make the tea. Naruto planned to a long blood while to make those cups of tea. He didn't want to be too quick to see those dreadful women again. He was glad Shion was here, but did she really have to bring the brides of the Mormon Frankenstein? Naruto let out the heavy sigh he had been holding for what felt like forever. How was going to handle living in the same house a horny, broody teenaged girl, and those two miserable cows? 2 days. It had only been 2 days since this had all started. Naruto woke up and looked at his bedside clock with his tired blue eyes. Today was the start of the 3rd day Shion had been staying, or as she put it, temporarily living, with him, and it was already driving him nuts. It wasn't Shion that was the problem. Having her around was more than a delight. It was her annoying ladies, Naomi and Midori, that were the problem. If it was just Shion, it'd been fine. More than fine, fantastic. Naruto would happily spend all his free time just in bed with her. Not just having, but just being close to the blonde beauty and enjoying her sweet company. Though would defiantly happen at some point or other. Not to say that in the past 2 days they hadn't done anything. They had, and more than twice a day. But they could have done it twice as much, twice as loudly, and without being interrupted by the fat one and the walking skeleton. Those had to have been the most embarrassing things to ever happen to Naruto in his whole entire life. There they were, under the sheets, kissing each other with great passion, Shion's sharp painted nails stuck deep down into the flesh on Naruto's back while the said ninja pounded into her, hitting her in all the right places. She kissed, screamed, moaned, and wriggled underneath him with anticipation, moaning his name under her breath in ecstasy. Shion screamed into the kiss, wrapping her legs round his waist and forcing him into her deeper. The two jumped violently as they heard the click of the latch as someone entered the room without a care in the world, let alone permission. Naruto jumped off the blonde girl before the fat woman could speak. Shion quickly gathered the sheets up in front of her, covering her nude body as respectfully as she could. "Speed it up and finish this quick, please," came Naomi's command, before leaving the room as swiftly as she had entered, unbothered by what was going on. The two flushed scarlet, before looking at each other and then turning away with true embarrassment. What kind of creepy pervert would do that? Who could walk so casually into a room while two people with having? Obviously Naomi knew what they were doing, so why would she enter the room knowing what was going on? What did she mean by, "finish this quick"? They quickly started getting dressed, deciding it would be wise to not finish what they had started, while Naruto thought the uni-est of thoughts he could do take his manhood down, before heading downstairs to find it what was so important. It turned out the Midori had been keeping the time and had made mental notes of when Naruto left home for training. Sadly, the time of Naruto's departure for training was ticking close towards him, leaving him only minutes to get out the front door and meet Sai. Naruto rushed upstairs in a blind panic, pulling on his tracksuit and heading back downstairs. He gave a farewell kiss to the priestess, and bowed a goodbye to Midori and Naomi, before jumping out the door and heading to training. Training would have been fun for Naruto if Sakura had been there. She was bossy and serious most of the time, but she still brightened things up and stuck up for him when Sai decided to take the mick out of him. Instead, the pink-haired ninja had come down with some sort of terrible illness and had spent the last few days trying to heal herself, leaving only Naruto and Sai to train as a duo, and they didn't enjoy it. After everything that had happened recently, Naruto couldn't help but think that those jokes of Sai's had become actually painful to him. All his jokes about him not having any balls at all, or did his balls work at all, seemed to give him horrible flashbacks and thoughts to just a few weeks previous. Naruto gritted his teeth, holding his words back as he forced himself to carry on with his training, trying to take Shion's miscarriage off his mind. Naruto sighed as he lay in his bed with Shion's sleeping form back to back with him. He twisted his head round slowly, careful not to wake her too suddenly. "Shion?" Naruto asked quietly in a soft voice, listening intently for any movement from his sleeping loved one. Shion moaned as she began to awake from her deep sleep, twitching and stretching before turning over awkwardly, wriggling her shoulders. Naruto turned himself over too, before sitting up and looking down at the beautiful girl who had been lying asleep in his bed the whole night. A sweet smile spread across his face as love filled his veins, and a similar smile was mirrored across Shion's own cheeks. Shion giggled as she looked up at Naruto, her eyes sparkling dazzlingly. "You really should come and stay with me again," she said seductively. "No one would dare interrupt us doing it then," she giggled, pushing her chest up slightly and winking. Naruto laughed gently at her, before leaning down and locking his lips with her, loving the taste of her mouth even though it was the morning. They moaned into the kiss, Shion wrapping her arms round his neck and pulling him down on top of her slowly. Minutes passed, and the blonde priestess finally broke the kiss to whisper, "We really should probably get up." "Why?" Naruto whispered back, his face so close to hers, his lips tickled against hers as he spoke. "Because the Midori and Naomi won't be up for another hour if we're quiet. If we tiptoe through the living room and shut the kitchen door, we can probably have some alone time." She pecked his lips. Naruto had originally done what Shion had suggested, and offered Midori and Naomi his bed so they'd see him as a gentleman. He was alarmed when they refused in disgust, announcing the priestess must have the bed and that he was a fool and failure to think she should have sleeping arrangements on any other surface. The two annoyingly odd women had planned to sleep in Naruto's living room on the sofas and to force Naruto to sleep on the kitchen table so the priestess could have the bed to herself. But Shion quickly argued and saved Naruto from nights of terrible, uncomfortable sleep. "Can't we have alone time here?" Naruto pecked her lips back, his voice becoming rich with seduction very quickly. "In bed. Unless you like on a table," he giggled at his foul joke. It was said more for his own boyish humor. He knew before he said it that Shion would disapprove of it. It found himself to know the priest quite well when she pouted with a frown and said grumpily, "Is for the bedroom, not the place with you cook and eat." "I don't have a problem with it," Naruto shrugged with an awkward cheeky grin. "Well, I do." Shion stuck her tongue out at the blonde childishly, taking control of the subject. "So why can't we stay here, in bed?" Naruto worked his lips to her neck and began to kiss her pale flesh, feeling her blood pumping underneath her skin against his pink lips. "Because they'll hear," Shion mumbled, holding back a moan of pleasure from Naruto's romantic touch. "We'll wake them," she explained, biting her lip as she felt Naruto suck on a sensitive part of her neck. "We're never quiet even if we try," she giggled, threading her fingers through the ninja's blonde hair. "Come on, Naru," she whined, "I want a drink anyway." "I'll give you a dry. If you're going to insinuate what I think you are, that don't you even dare say it," Shion smirked, pushing him off her so he was sitting on top of her. Naruto winked, before climbing off of the priestess and standing beside the bed. He held out it courteously to Shion with a delicate smile. "A hand, my lady," he spoke in an upper-class English tone. Shion giggled, gradually taking his hand to help her off the bed. "Why thank you," she winked, before walking ahead of him, swaying her hips as she walked out the teenager's bedroom door. Naruto literally watched, drool dripping from the sides of his mouth as he stared at the beauty he could proudly call his girlfriend and lover. He shook himself from his dirty thoughts and wiped the drool off from the corners of his mouth and chin with the back of his orange t-shirt sleeves as he mentally thought to himself, "I really wish we could just stay in the bedroom." Shion hummed happily to herself as she stirred the mixture. Naruto peered over her shoulder, keeping an eye on what she did. The priestess had mentioned to him that she didn't know much about cooking, leaving the blonde ninja with a slight concern of being accidentally poisoned by the pretty girl. "Must you stand so close to me?" Shion asked, sounding more cheerful than annoyed. "You're becoming a distraction." Naruto stuttered out a reply, careful in case he might offend, "I just like watching you cook for me." He smiled a little nervously, "It's not every day someone does this for me." "Well, while I'm here being your little wife," Shion giggled as she spoke. She really did love saying that. "Your little wife, you'll have this every day." The priestess lifted the spoon out the glass bowl and examined the gloopy content that drooled down from the wooden utensil. Satisfied that it was clear from lumps and bumps, she headed over to the cooker and turned on the hob, frying pan already in place. Shion knocked her hip against Naruto, pushing him away to give her space. Then a little thought came into her head. Husbands must always listen and always agree with their wives, Shion began with a smug look on her pale face. "Not all the time," Naruto wavered in disagreement, curious of what was going on in her head. Yes, all the time. And at this moment, your wife orders you to stop hovering again like a frightened bee and to go sit down at the table. The priestess spoke with a harsher tone, pointing at the wooden kitchen table. Sit. The boy blinked before a little smirk pinched his cheek. No. He followed his arms. The priestess pouted and strolled over to her husband, hands on her shapely hips. Still smirking, Naruto looked her up and down, admiring the fine curves of her hourglass figure. He lifted his arms out to her. Shion raised a disapproving eyebrow. I'm busy cooking for you. Shion frowned, walking away from the ninja and returning to her cooking. Sit, she ordered, having not forgotten. With a roll of his blue eyes, Naruto sat down, a faint smile on his face even so as he watched the girl cook and slightly burn breakfast. As they sat down to eat, their conversation was light and friendly, with a little bit of footsie going on under the table. Shion giggled childishly as Naruto's toe traveled up and down her legs slowly. Their sweet time together was interrupted by a loud knocking at the door. Naruto hesitated before getting up just as the knock tapped again. As the blonde ninja opened the door, he was greeted with the uncomfortable-looking Sakura, one hand holding the opposite elbow. Hey Naru, she smiled weakly, I heard you have a little visitor? Yeah, Naruto's words silenced at the sound of Shion calling out from the kitchen. Who is it, honey? Naruto twitched. Honey? That's a new one. Sakura. Who? This time it was Sakura who twitched. What the hell does she mean, who? Sakura carried the fussy priestess for miles. What a stuck-up, blonde, little. Shion bounced to the door, linking one arm with Naruto's, her spare hand resting on his shoulder. She gave a smug little smile at Sakura, who did her best to smile back nicely. Shion, you remember Sakura? Shion blinked at the pink-haired girl before turning to Naruto. No. She was on the mission with me, Naruto explained, hoping that Shion's memory would be jogged soon before Sakura was fully offended. Shion shook her head. I only remember you, she beamed sweetly at her lover. Sakura cleared her throat to grab their attention. Anyway, she began. I just stopped by to tell you congratulations. Shion's whole body stiffened, her eyes on stalks. Naruto's gaze moved away from both women to gaze down the road nervously. What? Was all Shion could stutter out. Sakura shuffled where she stood, on the baby, congrat. Shut up. Shion screamed at her, releasing her grip on Naruto's arm. Her fingers turned into pale fists as she rushed away from the door and up the stairs, her sobs echoing to the ears of the two ninjas, still standing as they were before. Naruto? Sakura whispered, feeling a little helpless. She wanted to rage out her frustrations, but did her best to stay calm. She knew the situation was delicate already. She lost it, the blonde boy explained weakly, his misery seeping into his words, a week ago. Sakura mouthed an, oh, as her own words left her dumb. I'm sorry, she finally said, if I had known, I wouldn't have. Words abandoned the girl again as her eyes linked with Naruto's sad gaze. I don't know what to do, he finally whispered. I just want to make her happy. Sakura felt her heart drop. What had happened to her old immature friend? When had he grown to be a man? Him and Shion, they almost seemed like an old married couple. A heartbroken couple. To Sakura, at that moment, Naruto reminded her of a clown. A bubbly character, funny and fun, but suddenly all that was gone when their circus comes to end. Who ever heard of a sad clown? That isn't a sight anyone wants to see. And here Sakura was, staring at the closest thing to that. A single tear of the clown rolled down Naruto's lightly blushing cheek. He wiped it away fiercely, not about to break down just yet. I'll talk to you later, he muttered out. K? Sakura mumbled, before turning to drift away without another word as guilt and shock made her legs heavy. One of the guards protecting the house, Shion to be precise, watched her like a hawk as she trudged away. Naruto closed the door, before leaning his entire weight onto the wood, slowly sliding down until he was on his knees as he held back tears of pain and anguish. He bit his lip hard and shut his eyes tightly as he forced back tears. The cool, brown wood felt calming against his slowly heating skin. Naruto took some deep, heavy breaths with shaky exhales. He swallowed hard and, almost as if he was frightened of what he might look at, opened his eyes. For a minute, he just kneeled there on the floor, his eyes staring at the swirling patterns in the mood. A single tear escaped his eye as he swallowed again. Suddenly, Naruto heard a howl. Before he could register what he was doing, Naruto was rushing him the stairs, stumbling twice as worry engulfed his wind. Shion's sobs became round as he reached the top and he quickly located her whereabouts. Naruto crashed into the bathroom, the door slamming loudly against the tiled wall. Shion, Naruto spat, out of breath. The room became almost silent except for the faint sound of running water. Shion stood with her back to Naruto, her hands bathing in the china sink and her face looking down into it as if she was ashamed of the reflection she'd see if she'd dare look at the mirror in front of her. In her reflection, Naruto couldn't see her expression as her light blonde hair acted a curtain to face. A few snuffled came from the weeping, slightly hunched over girl. The blonde boy slowly made his way over to his crying paramour while the other wormed its way to the top of the rest and gently but with force, pushed her up to stand up straight. Shion let out another sorrowful sob, only to be hushed by Naruto, placing a kiss on her cheek. "I'm here," he muttered, pecking her jaw. "You got me," he kissed her cheek. Naruto glanced down over the priestess' shoulder. Shion's hands were being painted a painful, sore-looking shade of red by the liquid easel of the steaming water. Condensation had quickly built up at the bottom of the mirror from the heat of the boiling water. Naruto removed his hand from her chest, and instead headed to her ruby hands. He took hold of one delicate wrist and slowly took it out of the water and placed it at her side. "Don't that," he muttered the order to her, "never hurt yourself. You're too pretty for physical scars." The blonde boy reached to turn the tap off and drain away the water. "I don't need to hurt myself," Shion hiccuped, "the people around me do that already. I will never hurt you. You won't mean to." Shion cried harder. "You'll die like everyone else I've cared about. Everyone always dies." Shion screamed out, wriggling in Naruto's grips, minding her sore hands from touching anything. The blonde boy wrapped his second arm round her waist and held her close, planting kisses on every peeping bit of skin of the wriggling girl. "I promise I won't die," he vowed. "I'll be alive until you don't need me anyone." Shion settled in his grip, leaning her head back onto his should, her cries becoming a silence. With the voice of a mouse, the priestess whispered back, "I'll never stop needing you." "Not everyone dies like that," he whispered, trying to soothe the girl. "They do," she sniffled. "If not everyone dies like that," she stuttered out. "Then why? Ba." Shion choked on her own words. Naruto hushed her again. I know, he kissed her cheek. "I don't know why Kami-sama decided to be so cruel to you." He kept kissing her cheeks, lightly rocking her on the spot as she began to cry again. "I want she began through her tears, "my baby back." Naruto was silent as he rocked his sobbing paramour, no longer kissing her, but simply laying his head on her shoulder. Shion slowly began to become silent herself, her blurry vision clearing, allowing her to make a little more sense of the word for a moment. The priestess found herself staring back at herself in Naruto's large bathroom mirror. A petite smile crept up her cheeks as she saw them both, Naruto holding her tightly to him as he could never let her go. She felt so vulnerable and so lost that she truly wished that moment would never end. She felt safe and warm in the tanned boy's strong arms. She left that when he finally released her, she'd shattered to pieces with her glue. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.